everyone, to the January 29th, 2025 Historic Landmarks Commission meeting. Can we have a roll call, please?
Thank you, Vice Chair Uli. I'll take roll call. Chair Grumbein is absent. Vice Chair Uli?
Yes.
Commissioner Butler is absent. Commissioner Dorden?
Yes.
Commissioner Drury?
Here.
Commissioner Ensberg?
Here.
Commissioner Lundvik?
Yes.
And Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
We have quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. First item of business under general is A, public comment. Anyone in the room wish to address the commission about anything that's not on our agenda but is our business? Not seeing anyone?
Thank you, Vice Chair Uli. I do not have any virtual participants nor any speaker slips, so I'll just state for the record that we did receive written correspondence from Kevin Boss, Sherry Ray, Edward Taser Myers, and 2 other submissions from Kevin Boss. With that, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. On to item B, approval of the minutes for January 15th, 2025.
So moved. I'll second.
Any discussion? Any edits?
No.
Roll call, please.
Thank you. Commissioner Dorden?
Yes.
Commissioner Drury?
Yes.
Commissioner Ensberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Lundvik?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Uli?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Approval of the minutes for the consent calendar of January 15th, 2025.
So moved. I'll second.
Any discussion? Any edits? Roll call, please.
Thank you. Commissioner Drury?
Yes.
Commissioner Ensberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Lundvik?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Dorden?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Uli?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Ratification of actions taken for today's consent calendar, January 29, 2025.
I'll make that motion. Second.
Any discussion? Any comments?
I will go through the items. Thank you, Chair Uli. Item A was 630 Garden Street, which received project design approval and final approval as submitted with the necessary findings. And item B was 612 Castillo Street, which received project design approval and final approval as submitted with the necessary findings. And that was all for the consent calendar today.
Thank you. Any questions?
Go back to 6:30.
Putting gates on the arches of this
Okay,
building.
so those are the findings I see, 1, A, B, C, D, right?
Yeah.
So there were no comments.
No, all looked good. Unfortunate, we had to fortify the place, but that is the world we live in. Roll call, please.
Thank you. Commissioner Lundvik?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Dorden?
Yes.
Commissioner Drury?
Yes.
Commissioner Ensberg?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Uli?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
On to item E, announcements, requests by applicants for continuances or withdrawals, future agenda items, and appeals.
No announcements from staff at this time.
Thank you. Anybody
Just kidding. We do have one announcement.
apologize? Go ahead.
Just wanted to remind you all you did receive the MEA updates in your folder. That's going to be on the next agenda. You have more than 2 weeks to review the documents. We wanted to give you and the consultants plenty of time. We did send notice to all the consultants on our consultants on our consultant list. So that's coming for your review in 2 weeks.
Awesome.
So you should have access to that.
So if we have a challenge sleeping at night, that is a perfect document to cuddle up with.
Right. It'll soothe you right
Right.
down.
Commissioner Limbeck.
I have a question of staff. Does the staff know if there's anything being pursued on the passageway between the parking lot and Figueroa Street, West Figueroa Street? I forget the address there, it might be.
The 9 West Figueroa
Yeah.
Paseo.
Yeah.
I have received no updates on that project.
They did get approval for improvements to the parking lot itself, but not the
Correct.
arcade or whatever it's there.
Correct.
Paseo.
Paseo, thank you. Did we not ask for, or maybe it makes no difference if we ask for it or not? For,
I believe the commission asked for updates sometime last year, and I did not receive any, but I will follow up on that. and
it'd
see
be
if I
interesting to
can
know
get
what's
any
happening
updates.
there. I mean, the chain link is there and whatever. I'd appreciate that, thank you.
I will return to the commission with some updates.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, Vice
Commissioner
Chair
Innsbruck.
Cooley. I would just like to bring up again the idea of the Department of Historic Preservation and keep that in our mind to be thinking about. I feel that this would go a long way to helping the city to move forward more smoothly if we had a little more power in that department. Thinking about the Stone Pines, for example, so if we had more influence and were involved in the discussion early on, I think that having a department would really help that. So I would like to just continue to bring that up, and if we can, there's an appropriate time to discuss it further, I would welcome that.
All right, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none. On to subcommittee reports. Are there any reports from subcommittees?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Commissioner.
so I was just at the Arts Advisory part of the Delegara design, and we had a meeting, and that's all I can say at the moment.
Thank you. Any others?
Yes, Vice Chair Uli, there was a meeting yesterday at council where they talked about the proposed interim work going on State Street. And unfortunately, our interim group, we didn't get notice in time to be able to, attend, which we would have liked to have attended, but we didn't find out about it. It was just kind of just a glitch in the system, let's say. So we were not able to have anyone from our group to attend, and but we did have some communication with staff, which was very positive and good, and they, were sorry about the miscommunication and not letting us know earlier. So I think that will go better in the future so that we can be advised of things and be part of the conversation and be prepared for important meetings like that.
All right, thank you. A glitch in the matrix is what you're saying? Any other reports? Seeing none. Brings us to our first item. Item number 1, adaptive reuse ordinance. No final appealable decision will be taken at this hearing. If you could make sure your microphone is on and tell us who you are and what you're up to. There you go.
Perfect, yes. Hey, everybody, Historic Landmarks Commission. My name's Dana Folk. I'm a long-range project planner here working on an adaptive reuse ordinance. Give me 1 second to get the slide going. Okay, we're going. I'm here today to share with you a quick overview of the ordinance that we took to Planning Commission this past December, talk you through next steps at a very high level, and then I have a question for your feedback. So the adaptive reuse ordinance that we're working on is implementing a housing element program, and I wanted to give a just brief overview of how it may impact you. Ultimately, there will be no change to your purview or your design review process as part of this ordinance. The ordinance is intending to encourage the creation of more housing in existing non-residential buildings, including designated historic resources, which may mean that you get to see more projects here to create housing. That ordinance, again, is to incentivize the creation of housing in non-residential existing buildings, and we're looking to do that with the codification of commonly approved modifications that ultimately should reduce the planning process for these projects to, again, loop back to the creation of more housing development. When I say adaptive reuse, I just want to make sure what I mean is clear, and the city staff here, we're proposing that adaptive reuse mean the retrofitting and repurposing of existing buildings to create new residential units. I know adaptive reuse generally means just any change of use to reuse a building, but when we talk about it here at the city, we're proposing it always mean conversion to create housing. So when I say adaptive reuse, I mean existing building, non-residential to residential. The ordinance we took to Planning Commission this past December had 4 main components of them that I'm going to talk through very quickly today. The staff report from that Planning Commission hearing was provided to you, which included the entire ordinance, so I don't want to spend a lot of our time here today explaining something that you guys are already aware of, but I do want to give a high-level overview to get us all on the same page. The first component I would like to mention is the applicability. We're saying that for projects to be able to use this ordinance, they have to fall into one of these 4 applicability categories. So for you, the most interesting one is going to be historic resources, as well as those projects that may occur within the central business district, since that closely aligns with EPV. Just want to make note that hotels anywhere in the city or any project proposing 50% of the new units be affordable would also be able to utilize the incentives proposed in this ordinance. So applicability category must meet 1. There are also eligibility criteria. You must meet all 7. It ties back to reusing existing buildings. They must be 10 years old. You must be creating residential units. The residential use must be allowed in the zone you're proposing it in, and you must maintain the existing open space and automobile parking that are on the site. Now, if you meet applicability and you meet eligibility, you get these incentives, and these are zoning development standard incentives. So there would be no maximum residential density for these conversion projects. You wouldn't have to meet the setback requirements for those conversion portions. Again, you're using an existing building, and there wouldn't be no requirement for adding automobile parking or open yard to these new buildings for this new use. Additionally, there are a few other things that I did not put them all here. This is a very high-level list, but the one I do want to call your attention to is the ground floor non-residential space required on State Street. I'll get into that in a tiny bit more detail when I get to the question for you all. The review process, like I mentioned, there's going to be no impact to HLC's purview or design review process at all through this ordinance. There is one slight change to the planning review process, and that would be for the AUD projects that currently require a pre-app and a concept design. That would not be required for these adaptive reuse projects. And ultimately, the ordinance would mean that no zoning modifications would be required for these projects for parking, density, open yard, or setbacks, because those are the incentives that we're proposing. When we took this to Planning Commission, they did have some thoughts. I put the kind of most frequently heard ones here that I just wanted to bring to you and let you know that staff is working on revising the ordinance in light of these comments. The first has to do with the applicability. We had proposed those 4 categories, and Planning Commission had asked that we looked at expanding the applicability to citywide. We were asked to reevaluate the requirement for ground floor non-commercial or non-residential, space on State Street, as well as reevaluating the additions allowance that we were proposing, and ultimately to coordinate more closely with some other city regulations that impact these adaptive reuse projects. And I do want to note, we did hear comments about the inclusionary housing requirements, but that is going to be done under a separate staff work effort that's underway, and so is not part of the conversation with adaptive reuse. So we will be going back to Planning Commission. Our goal is late spring at present, and the plan is to get it adopted by City Council by the end of the year. This again aligns with housing element program that this is implementing. Now to the fun part. So we are here, I'm here today to get your guys' input on the State Street requirement for non-residential space. The intention here is to activate the facade, the ground floor, from Montecito to Sola solely on State Street itself. And staff proposed that the first 35 feet of depth behind the facade be non-residential space to lead to activation. Planning Commission had thoughts both in support of the depth idea as well as looking at using a percentage of ground floor instead. And so general comments are welcomed, but if you guys do have any thoughts on which method you would support to regulate that facade element of these buildings on the ground floor, specifically on State Street, I would be very excited to hear them. And with that, I'd like to say thank you and turn it back over to you for your thoughts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Open up public hearing, public comment.
So we don't have any speaker slips at this current time. If anybody in the room wants to speak on it, they would need to bring me one. But I'm not seeing any movement. We did not have any written correspondence on this topic, and we don't have any attendees online. So turn it back to you.
Thank you. Close public comment. Bring it to the commission for questions.
Mr. Chair,
Mr.
I
Torrey.
just have one. So the existing setbacks will not be changed?
Correct, yes, because we are requiring the reuse of the existing building and the existing building envelope.
So that'll remain the same?
Correct, yes.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Ansberg.
Thank you, Chair Uli. One question on the existing building, just to clarify, does the exterior of the existing building, what kind of changes can be allowed?
So, like I mentioned, there would be no change to what your purview or design review process is at present. So if a project was proposing to adaptively reuse the structure into residential with no exterior modifications, design review wouldn't be triggered, even on a normal change in use project with our current standards in place. If a project wants to use this ordinance and does not propose any exterior changes, then it would not trigger design review. That remains the same. But if they are coming in and wanting to do window changes, change the facade on that ground floor, then it would trigger design review, and then you would see it for those historic resource as well as the ones that are within EPB.
Yeah, we did have that one project, the building that was, the Chamber of Commerce, I think it was, once upon a time?
Yes, that
The
one
old Hunt's
is.
building.
Yeah, that building, which is a beautiful building, and, the work to make it into residential required that they do some things, but they restored it back, and so we had a conversation, and it was, excellent.
Yeah,
So
arch
that's
was
what we're talking about,
reiterated. Yes.
something along those lines?
Yes, so that is an excellent example because it came in and converted a non-residential space into residences. Because they did those exterior changes, it triggered design review, and then you guys were able to share your expertise on how to make that fit as best as it could.
Great. And then, could we just go to slide 12 for 1 second? There was something on there that
Yes.
piqued my question. What does it mean, reevaluate additions allowance? What does that mean?
As part of the ordinance that we took to Planning Commission, we had said that a project could only be eligible if it meets certain criteria, and one of those criteria was the project must be within the existing building envelope. Understanding that changing the use to residential may trigger additional items that are necessary inside the space. Your program changes, therefore your space may change as well. And egress and fire life safety elements are, vital components to a project. So as part of the additional requirements, we had done an allowance for an addition that would not kick a project out of meeting the eligibility requirement for being within this space. So a project could add as much exterior to the existing envelope as they needed to meet egress or fire life safety elements, as well as a 250 square foot maximum for any space that was available to all tenants. So let's say a project needed to add a laundry room. They could do that as an exterior space, not within the existing envelope, and it wouldn't trigger some of these other portions of our code that limit that type of work being done without a bunch of other stuff falling into place. So when we took this to Planning Commission, they had some thoughts that maybe that 250 square feet wasn't the best method to evaluate the allowance for additions, and that's why we're looking to reevaluate it. So any thoughts there as well are very helpful.
Okay, so I understand. And then lastly, the stormwater management, which of course is a big thing we're all trying to figure out, but what are the thoughts on that? Coordinate with other city regulations.
I will say I am no expert on our SWIMP requirements. I have had a couple of conversations with our staff who do create those and regulate those to try and become at least a little bit aware enough to talk about them. So pardon me for any incorrectness that I may state here, but they're going to be our knowledge experts here. We were hearing from public comments that some other city regulations can be pretty detrimental to the creation of new residential units in adaptive reuse projects. And one of them that we heard about was some of these SWIMP requirements. And so Planning Commission was very concerned about any impediments that may be hindering the creation of housing and strongly suggested that we speak to these other divisions and departments that have regulations that may impact those projects. The one that we heard most frequently in December about was SWIMP. So we spoke with Creeks, yes, thank you, over 2 weeks ago, a week ago, just kind of getting their input. We're doing some more research into current projects, such as the one you mentioned, the 12 East Creo, and some other ones that have met the adaptive reuse conversion into residential, to kind of see how they handled these, to just reevaluate what those things are and how we can coordinate with them. I will say ultimately, right, I work in community development and planning. We don't control those regulations, so the best we can do is ask and kind of bring to light that there are these things that we're working on, and maybe engender some support across, this other regulations, but ultimately, the best we can do is talk to them, which we're working on doing, and just getting more aware of the interplay, because they can be a lot.
Excellent. Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair,
Commissioner
two
Dorn.
quick questions about projects that would come before this commission. You said that pre-app, and conceptual review would be exempted. So the first time we would see it, they would be requesting preliminary design approval? At what stage it would come as a PDA for us?
There would be no change to your purview or design process, except for those large projects that at present under the AUD program would require that pre-app and a concept design. Adaptive reuse, as I'm defining it today and here in this ordinance, is the conversion of an existing structure
Right.
to new. So they would only come to you if they're doing any kind of exterior changes. So it's
Right,
yes,
but
they would only come to you for
my question is,
PDA.
they would come to us the first time we would see it.
They'd be
They would
co-required, yeah.
requesting PDA.
Correct. I mean, if ultimately, if they'd like to come to concept, right, that's available, but yep.
My other question deals with, if I understood you correctly, the ordinance would allow or require maintaining existing parking.
Correct, yes.
How does that interface with state laws that are reducing the requirement for parking?
Yes, you hit on a very interesting kind of interplay, and the wording of the ordinance, I will say, is very particular, so read it closely. So when we look at existing sites, let's say 12 East Creo, they have no parking there. So because there's none, they wouldn't be required to maintain any, because there isn't any. And then because the incentive for parking that we're proposing in the ordinance would not require any additional parking, they would be okay. No parking currently, no parking required, no parking done. But let's say a project has 6 parking spaces in the back, right? Just a nice number that I can do math with easily. Let's say they're coming in and they are proposing 8 units, and for simplicity, each of those units only requires 1 parking stall. So they have 6, they required 8. They couldn't remove those 6. They're required to maintain the existing parking, but no additional parking is required. So they wouldn't have to make up those 2 additional spaces that were required for the new use. If they don't require any because of state law, then they don't have to maintain them.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Limbeck.
Say that again.
Trust me, we've gone around and around on this one.
Well,
And hopefully I'm explaining it
so
properly.
they're converting a commercial property that has 8 parking spaces, as you said. They're going to put 6 units in. They would, under normal circumstances, they would require 6 spaces.
Correct.
But you're not going to require any because they already got 6, and you can't remove the 8.
It's very closely worded in the ordinance. Let me find it here
Well,
and
says
pull
you-
it up so I
it
can
said-
just
yeah,
say
okay.
it properly. One sec, sorry. Yes, so when you look at the ordinance here, number 7, the development will not eliminate any existing required parking. It's not required by state law. They don't have to maintain it. Does that make sense? I'm going to say the wording was very particular in how this piece was drafted and went back and forth multiple times. So if there's any clarity you would like to provide, I'm all ears, but, right.
Yeah,
land use decisions.
I read that,
Uh-huh.
and I said to myself, it would appear to me that they cannot eliminate any existing required parking for the parcel. The parcel originally, because it was commercial, required 8 spaces.
No, that's a
Zoning
good point.
ordinance required it.
This might need a little bit more working because of that statement. Okay. I hear
So
ya.
I said, well, they're not going to be able to eliminate those 8. 6 of those they've got to maintain for their 6 units. All well and good. You're telling me there's a different interpretation about that?
Our interpretation was the required meant required for the new use. So if the new use doesn't require any parking, because there's no parking there because of state law or other methods, then that would not be required, so therefore it doesn't have to be maintained.
But there may be required because you're allowing or requiring commercial on the ground floor to a
Potentially.
depth of,
But they're in zone of benefits, so not using state law. They have different allowances locally
well,
for parking.
but that commercial space may have required parking.
May have, so they should have built it, right?
Well, you're maintaining some commercial, and that commercial requires some parking.
This is a question, right?
It's a question.
Yeah. I will say that the Central Business District has very unique parking requirements because they do have the zone of benefit for the parking structures. And so there are some projects, even on State Street, if they have non-residential space, because of that zone of benefit that they're in, they may not have to provide actual parking.
But this-
So for this project, if they're only on State Street where we are considering the requirement for commercial, it may not trigger the requirement for parking on site.
But adaptive reuse ordinance is for the whole city,
Correct.
not just a business district. So that means that on the Upper West Side, there could be a commercial building that is underutilized but is required parking because of its original approvals. That has to be maintained, I would assume, for some portion of the commercial.
For the required amounts for that use.
Is that what
yes.
this says?
Correct.
It just
yes.
does say that.
That's my interpretation of it, yes.
Then let's say someone comes along and says,
Question, right?
it's a question. Someone comes along and says, okay, I'm not required to have any parking for residential in reality.
Depending on their area, I will agree with that statement, yes.
Well, by current state law, you maybe wouldn't have to. Adaptive reuse you do. I'm just trying to think out loud here. Let's say someone comes along and says, okay, I'm gonna take that parking lot back there with 8 spaces, and I'm gonna put in either more commercial, or I'm gonna put in more residential. In either
So-
case,
To get these incentives for no parking, additional parking requirement, has to be within the existing building envelope with a very small allowance for additions. So I think that might head off your question because they wouldn't be able to build something new on those spaces and still be considered an eligible project. So there's a lot of interplay. Is that,
yeah.
I mean, read it closely, share your thoughts.
I will
It's
think
good to-
about it.
We've definitely
I will-
gone around and around, I
yeah.
will say internally, on this exact phrasing, back and forth with, city planner, back and forth with city attorney to make sure that we're getting it as clear as we can. So I will make a note that this is something we need to rediscuss internally because it is a hot topic for sure.
There is poorly worded parking in the current ordinances that deal with residential downtown.
There's a lot of different
Not
overlapping
requiring
regulations, I
parking.
will say.
And we've seen projects come through and provide no parking. But if you read the ordinance closely, where commas, periods,
Oh, yes.
and the other things are, it doesn't, the ordinance is not, if read by a lawyer, does not waiving the requirement for parking.
Question mark.
Question. End of questions, thank you.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I,
Commissioner.
could you roll up that same page?
Yes, where would you
So
like me to
three,
stop?
three becomes, number 3.
Okay. So 3, about within the existing building envelope.
That seems to make things pretty clear.
That was the goal.
But then again, I'm not an attorney.
Well, that doesn't deal with the 250 square feet, that's dealt with elsewhere.
That's elsewhere in the document, yeah.
Just within,
And what we see.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything.
Well, I can appreciate the laundry room issue, but if you've got a building, let's say on State Street, which is cheek to jowl, the property lines, and we do require bike,
Correct,
Parking.
that, there's no change to
where
bike
does
parking.
that go?
That's for an architect to figure out.
Well, it's, I don't know, do you get more square footage someplace else?
Well, first of all, we're not trying to design a building here, so if we stay focused on on the three things that they're asking us to do, that would be good. Are there any more questions?
Yes, sure.
Commissioner LaCour.
Uli, so with regard to that 35-foot setback you talked about, is that so that you're walking down State Street and you're not seeing a residential unit?
The intention is to provide street activation, focusing solely on the State Street frontages from Sola all the way up to,
Well,
or from
could-
Montecito, sorry, all the way up to
Couldn't
Sola.
you just have an 8-foot setback so that you're not seeing a bedroom, but you're seeing a little commercial spaces? How did you derive the 35?
So so how did we come up with this number? Part of it was talking with the consultant that we have for the objective design and development standards. Right there, Opticos, they're pretty well-versed in these kinds of things. And looking at the usability of a space. An 8-foot deep
Yeah.
space would probably just
Yeah,
be
sure.
empty. It's
Okay,
not
I understand.
super viable for
Yeah.
use. Opticos had provided as part of odds, that's, we call it the objective design standards internally, that 35 feet would be the minimum space. And so
sure.
we were building
Yeah,
off of the work that
seems
they had done
reasonable.
and created, that 35 feet was an ideal depth of,
Sounds good. So would that residential person enter a commercial facility and then find their door to their unit, kind of like? Is it, or I guess that's.
no, there's an
another-
allowance for like having a small lobby or, staircase to go up or something.
okay.
So yes, yeah.
Yeah, and then lastly, how did the Sur Latal building, I can't remember, did they black out the front windows, or how does that handle?
They have commercial on the ground floor.
Okay.
Yeah, they have a small little door off to the side that does go up to
Okay.
kind of like a lobby common area, but it is a commercial on the ground floor.
Thank you.
On to comments. Commissioner Ensberg.
Thank you. I am very excited about this, and thank you for all the great work that you guys have been doing on it. And, obviously, it's a work in progress, and so many of these things we've talked about, you're continuing to sort out. So I'm very supportive and enthusiastic about this. And I like the idea. I think citywide makes a lot of sense to me, to expand it to wherever there's an opportunity to do it. The 35 feet, they're somewhere between 8 feet and 35 feet. So I really think we could benefit by having smaller retail and little, I can think of many places, when I've traveled, great places you can walk right up to and get a coffee right from the window. And so I think maybe 35 feet is a little too much and maybe 8 feet is not enough. So, but I like the idea of the activation. And I guess that's just for State Street or for a commercial street. Would that also apply for like De La Vina, Milpas?
At present, we are proposing it solely be a requirement on State Street from Montecito up to Sola. So if the building fronts onto State, that's the only ones that would have this requirement for the non-residential ground floor.
Okay. And then maybe you think about that for these other, highly commercial areas. And then finally, on the parking, not to belabor it at all, but I just want to say, it is the intent. I think what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say is that the intent is that if there is existing parking, but that the new use does not require parking because the state law, then they would not have to, they could get rid of that parking and they could make it something else. They would not have to retain it. When you say they don't have to maintain, they don't have to have parking anymore. And that space could be used for something else, like bicycle parking or a laundry room or whatever they want to do. But the intent of it is what I just said,
That sounds correct.
right?
That sounds-
Should I
that-
say it again or
No, I think you're good. I think that sounds right.
Just to simplify, and I know that you are, I think Commissioner Lenvik brings up some of the weeds of it that are very important, and that you're working on it. So I recognize that you are working on that, and he's bringing up some good points for you to consider.
I don't agree with you. I think parking is required.
I'm saying that the intent that they're trying to go with, now maybe we'll find out that it is, but I think what I'm hearing is that the intent is if the state says that there's no parking required, then if you're doing an adaptive reuse and there is no commercial or something that's causing there to be parking required, then you don't have to have parking. Just to put it in the most simplest of terms, which is probably, doesn't meet city standards. Thank you.
Any other comments? right, there were at least two questions it sounds like you wanted to get some feedback on, but my initial question is, the ordinance is seeking to codify common modifications that are asked for in these kinds of projects, make that part of the code, so they don't have to seek a modification. Is that the intent?
At its simplest form, yes.
And I'm sure there'll be a list of those somewhere. Yeah.
There are definitely in the staff report, yeah.
The first one was the 35-foot. You, Commissioner Insberg, spoke to that. It seems like potentially a range, the commission ought to consider recommendation of a range, so not less than 8, not more than 35, or something like that, so that there's a range of possibilities. What are the thoughts? Commissioner Lindvik.
Well, we've got to be careful about this. You say, well, 8 foot's great, except you got to put a handicap restroom in there. You can't get away with a commercial space without a restroom. So all of a sudden, you've taken up, 7 or 8 feet just in the restroom depth. We got to be careful about what we ask for and leave enough so that there is enough space so there's a viable retail use there. It's important.
Other thoughts?
One, to that point, we have a number of buildings in downtown Santa Barbara that have restrooms that are for the entire building. The San Marcos building, for example.
Good, I agree.
So-
We can
so-
go upstairs to the residential unit and go potty.
No, not that. I'm saying they're public bathrooms, and they are for all of the retail spaces and restaurants in those buildings. So not to get into the design of it, I agree with you, yeah, we need to be careful, but we're not designing the building. We're trying to give them input about these particular items. And we're not saying you can avoid the code or that you don't have to do this, but I think we are all, on one side of things, we're trying to get smaller retail for more, ma and pa type places that could be possible. So, yes, you have to meet all the codes, definitely. If there's a bathroom required, then you have to have that. But, we see a lot of ways that can be accomplished. So, thank you.
All right. Any other comment regarding retail space? The next one was addition allowance. Could you just briefly explain that again? Because what I was hearing was that if a particular project wanted to use these allowances, that somehow I heard you say or imply that there's no design review, but
If they do any exterior work, anything that would trigger design review currently would still trigger design review, except for that pre-app and concept requirement for the larger AUDs. So if a project was coming and proposing to build a staircase on the exterior of a structure, because that's exterior work, right, that's your guys' purview. So it would still come to you. We're saying, because there's a requirement in the adaptive reuse ordinance that the project must be contained within the existing envelope, that if they do need to build a staircase because of egress reasons, that wouldn't kick them out of being eligible for the incentives of this. But there's very particular reasons why they can build outside the envelope and still be considered an eligible adaptive reuse project. Staircases, right, for egress are one of them. And then I pulled up on the screen, this is the limits on that new floor area where a project can still be considered eligible. That 250 square feet for an additional residential kind of amenity space or anything for necessary to build to comply with building code. At the very bottom of your screen, I'm trying to get it all to fit, but unfortunately margins being what they are. That's not to say that a project can't come in and they don't want to meet the eligibility requirements. They can still come in. We have, it's called change in use. That's still going to be out there. Those projects that you guys are seeing now, the 12 East Carrillo, that's a change in use project. They come in, they meet all of our development standards. They may be able to request zoning modifications. There's a whole process that these projects go through. They have the oversight. That process still exists. We're saying for projects that meet these very specific applicability and eligibility requirements, they get these incentives without requiring that zoning modification. But that's not to say somebody wants to come in and build 1,000 square feet addition. They go through all of the process that's required for that. They can still do it. It just, they don't get the codified incentives that this ordinance is providing. But it would not remove any of the purview of HLC or ABR for the design review purposes.
Any thoughts on the 250 trigger? Was a percentage of the ground floor considered instead of a stated square footage number?
We did look at that as well, and ultimately, through a lot of iterations, staff elected to propose the 250 square feet as the additional allowance for projects that would be considered eligible. Again, those projects can still proceed,
Yeah.
but if they do more, they would have to pursue it through a different entitlements process.
All right. Any other comments? I guess we're done. Yeah, thank you. No reportable action. On to item number 2, an archaeological report for 102 West Delavina Street, or Delagara Street, requesting acceptance of a Phase 2 Archaeological Resources Evaluation Report prepared by Providence Group Incorporated. Dr. Glasso has reviewed it and agrees with the conclusions and recommendations.
Chair Uli, if I may say a couple words.
Sure.
The archaeologist is here to.
Thanks. Please join us.
But before I hand it off to our archaeologist, I just want to let you know the application for this project is currently incomplete. We're pretty close to completeness. Having acceptance of this report is one of the few remaining items, so that's what we're here for today, of course. We have gotten positive comments from ABR on the design. So it was continued indefinitely to Planning Commission at our last concept review. So that's where things stand right now. And with that, I'll hand it over to Ms. DiNardo.
Awesome. Welcome.
I'm Carol DiNardo.
You'll have to turn your microphone on there. There's a little button. There you go.
There we go. I'm Carol DiNardo with Provenience Group, and we prepared the Phase 2 study for 102 West De La Guerra Street.
Can you give us a summary of your conclusion?
We had, before we started our work, we did a lot of historic map research, which suggested there may be intact structural foundations, privies, trash dumps, all kinds of historic features. So we employed Scott Byram, who is a specialist with ground penetrating radar, to come out and take a look at the area using his ground penetrating radar to detect areas where there were densities of artifacts or structural remains. We identified 7 specific areas that appeared to have intact features of one sort or another. So those were the areas where we focused our attention. We started out by digging shovel probes and weren't finding much. So we did controlled backhoe excavations and had less than promising results. Although we did find some artifacts, everything we found was in very small pieces. Everything was crushed. There had been a soda bottle factory there in the late 1800s, so you would assume there would be bottles, complete bottles, like I've found in other situations. But it was not the case here. It was all teeny tiny fragments of glass and metal and other artifacts, and nothing that really had any meaningful conclusions. So we made a determination that the site does not qualify for the National Register. We did, however, because it was just 7 particular locations within the project area, there is a possibility that there may be intact features below the ground surface. So we did make a recommendation of monitoring during construction.
Thank you. Does that conclude your report?
That's it.
Thank you. We'll open public comment.
Yes, so I don't currently have any speaker slips, but if somebody in the audience would like to speak on it, they can fill one out and bring it up to me. I don't see any movement, so I'll move to online. There is one participant online. If you'd like to speak, you can raise your hand. Not seeing any raised hands, and we don't have any written correspondence on the topic, so back to you.
Thank you. Close public comment. Bring it to the commission for questions.
Chair Uli,
Commissioner?
just curious about this radar thing. So do you, when that work is done, do you go over the entire site? And then how deep does it go down?
It depends on the particular study. I mean, they can go way, way down. In this instance, I believe they went down to about 6 feet. And it's ground penetrating radar. And if they can pick up, either densities of artifacts, or if there is a void. In this case, there had been a well on the property.
Excuse me, could the applicant turn on their mic?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
In this case, there had been a well on the property, and so that turned up as a void in an area where there was nothing. And so ground penetrating radar is really a wonderful tool if you are looking for historic features such as structural foundation remains below the ground surface, artifacts, densities of artifacts associated with features such as privies, trash dumps, things like that. It is much less effective if you have a prehistoric archaeological site.
So it's density, it's not like an X-ray where you actually see a picture of a bottle or something.
No,
It's like,
no.
it's density, and so therefore you can assume, oh, right, there's density here, so it informs you that way. And then did they survey around, go over the entire site?
Not the entire site, where there had been buildings on closer to De La Guerra Street. We did not look at that area because that's where the actual buildings had been. But we did take it's kind of like a wheel thing, and he took it across back and forth through, I'd say, 3/4 of the project area.
Interesting. Well, thank you. We
Any other
learned
questions? Go into comments. Any comments? Yes, you did. Thank you. I appreciate that. Any comments? The matter is here for acceptance of the Phase 2. Does anybody want to make a motion?
Make a motion to set the report for 102 West De La Guerra.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion?
And that that this will include, as you recommended, on-site monitoring. Great.
Yes.
during the construction. Thank you, or
Yes.
excavation.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Okay, Commissioner Lenvick,
Yes.
Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan.
Abstain.
Okay. Commissioner Drury,
Yes.
Commissioner Ensberg,
Yes.
Vice Chair Uli.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a 10-day appeal period? No.
Reports are not appealable. Thank you.
I'll get the swing of it. I noticed that our legal counsel arrived, so she must have some sage advice for us. Welcome, Counselor.
Thank you. Tava Ostringer, Assistant City Attorney. It's good to see you all here today. As we move on to the next item, I'm not going to be here for that. I'll be here for the following item. So, but I'm always here for you.
All right. You made me a little nervous when you walked in the back door. I thought we'd done something wrong. It's good to see you. On to item 3, another archaeological report for 1 Hot Springs Road, requesting acceptance of Phase 2, prepared by Dr. Stone, and Dr. Glassow reviewed the report and agrees with the conclusions and recommendations.
Thank
Welcome.
you, Vice Chair Uli. Good to see you. And
Happy New Year,
congratulations.
and Happy Chinese Year of the
Absolutely.
Snake, I
All of the
believe
above.
it is, yeah.
I'd love to be called even a doctor.
Oh, you're not?
Honorary.
Oh, well, I'll take it back then.
Yeah.
Just a commoner.
Yeah, just a commoner.
Yeah.
That's
All right.
my thing. So this is a Phase 1, which is a little bit different than what you just had looked at. This was a survey over the project site, determine if there were potentially significant archaeological remains that might require the type of investigation you just discussed. So this is right across from the Santa Barbara Cemetery. It's a very interesting site, sandwiched between the cemetery and the freeway. Several archaeological investigations have occurred at this site, including one by Stone Archaeological Consulting in 2001. So subsequent to that, there have been a few others, including the present one. And the investigations have been cumulatively able to give us some very, very clear information. Number one, there's been substantial grading that has occurred in this particular area. How do we know this without actually being able to look at grading plans as built? Retaining walls are very, very helpful for that. When you see a retaining wall or a cut slope that shows excavations relative to an otherwise level area, you know that there has been substantial excavation. That is the case in this particular project site. So that suggests any archaeological materials that might be present there need to be evaluated relative to that grading that has occurred. There's retaining walls over 4 or 5 feet. There's cut slopes in this location. There are archaeological materials scattered throughout this property, and historic research that was done in one of the previous archaeological reports identifies that there were caretakers associated with the cemetery who had their homes, well, actually one was moved and then another was built in the 1920s. So the evidence of those structures are completely removed. There's evidence to indicate that they have been demolished. The remaining archaeological materials are just very, very low density, meaning there's not concentrations of things on the surface, and they are associated with household and construction debris that would be reasonably expected after the demolition of these 2 structures. There are some other things found on this project site, perhaps you looked at the photographs, that are associated with workshops that were also associated with the cemetery. Some curbs, sandstone curbs, hewn segments of sandstone curbs that you see from the 1920s and 1930s, and some landing area, sort of a loading dock. So the question is, there are materials here, are they potentially significant? Do they actually tell a story? that is related to CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, and the Master Environmental Assessment for Cultural Resources significance criteria. And for any of these materials to be considered significant and requiring the subsequent type of investigation you just heard about, they have to address those criteria. One is, are they associated with an important person or historical event in prehistory or history? Number two, do they actually represent an intact or non-compromised evidence of those? Is there something that we can learn from them because they are actually intact and haven't been disturbed? So in the case of these historical remains, they were very sparsely distributed. And I'm sorry, I should have been listening. Dr. Glasso has agreed with the conclusions. Did you hear that?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm just...
We got
Yeah.
distracted by whether you were a doctor or not.
Oh,
That's-
yeah,
we
okay.
got
Well, I'm
kinda
glad we
tied up in
clarified that issue. Dr. Uli.
Yeah.
And in this case, the extent of the disturbance of the homes having been completely removed and the substantial amount of grading that has occurred, evidenced by the cut slopes and the retaining walls, indicates that these remaining vestiges of these previous caretakers at the Santa Barbara Cemetery are not significant. Those people, the caretakers themselves, they're not written up in history as being significant figures. And unlike the cemetery, which is a city landmark, unlike the prehistoric site, which I shouldn't be too specific, that is not on this site but is very, very close by. There's a prehistoric site. There's no evidence of that prehistoric settlement, thereby resulting in a less than significant determination.
Does that conclude your report?
I'm hoping so.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll open public comment.
I don't currently have any speaker slips. We do have 2 people online, and if they would like to speak, they can raise their hand. Not seeing any raised hands, and I don't have any written correspondence on this item, so back to you.
Thank you. Close public comment. Bring it to the commission for questions.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner.
so basically the grading is just sort of, it was a wholesale slaughter of all the things just strewn all over the grading pattern.
Commissioner Drury, the concentration of the artifacts like porcelain fragments and that's are concentrated more on the western portion of the property where those 2 locations, those residences would have been.
Okay.
Yeah, would have been.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Pleasure.
Other questions? Comments?
Typically thorough structure, was a report. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Drury.
Is there a motion?
I'd move approval of the Phase 1
Second?
archaeology report for 1 Hot Springs Road.
I heard a second. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Okay, Commissioner Jordan,
Abstain.
Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
Commissioner Drury. Commissioner Drury,
Yes.
Commissioner Ensberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Lenvik,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Uli.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I had technical problems. I couldn't access it.
We're not doing terrible.
I can't imagine why there's an attorney here for Macy's or Macy's.
We're going to find out. Thank you. All right, that brings us to item 4, 3805 State Street, a historic assessment, requesting acceptance of Department of Parks and Rec Historic Resources form. City architectural historian reviewed the form and agrees with its conclusions that the property does not meet the criteria to qualify as a historic resource.
Mr. Chair and Commission?
Yes.
As you probably read in the memo, when we have forms that are required by the State Historic Preservation Office to be in the DPR form, we don't require them to reiterate the information in our historic structures format to economize for the applicant. And we haven't seen a federal project in a long time, but this is something that we've done in the past. It's very usual, and we just found out that the State Office for Historic Preservation also accepted that the conclusions of this DPR form that the building is not significant, as well as I agree with that as well.
Chair Uli.
Yes.
Commissioners, I'm just giving an admonition that I know there's a lot of interest in the underlying project, but it's not agendized for that, so it's focused strictly on this report today.
Thank you for that admonition. I'll try and make sure the commission follows it.
All right.
Please introduce yourself.
What's my title for today? Am I a doctor?
I don't know.
I'm just kidding.
You want to be a doctor?
Not really. I'm more like lady quarter. I'll be a lady. We'll go with that. Hello, Commissioners.
Very Downton Abbey of you.
It is very Downton Abbey of me. Sarah Porter from South Environmental. I'm here to present the project on a building I'm sure you all are extremely familiar with, the Macy's building, which is 3805 State Street, located at the corner of State and Hope. Get my bearings here with this computer. Little map here to show you exactly what we're dealing with. Originally designed in 1967 as a J.W. Robinson's department store in New Formalism style by architects Jen Wong and Max Horwitz, who both worked for William Pereira and Associates. I wanted to start today by showing you some overviews of the historic photographs of the building so that you can see a little bit about how it developed and how it changed over time. From the exterior standpoint, the building itself hasn't changed all that much, although La Cumbre Plaza has changed significantly over the years. These photographs represent, rendering on the right shows you what La Cumbre Plaza was intended to look like with the Macy's building as it stands now kind of in the forefront, and then the rest of the plaza in the back with the Sears all the way in the very, very back. And then on the left side, you see the Robinsons about around the time that it opened, showing those very large expanses of concrete, kind of the hipped roof that the Robinsons store became popular in the late 1960s. And you're just kind of seeing a little bit of the representation of what you currently see there now with regards to Robinsons. But the trick to this Robinsons was not the exterior, but the interior. And that's where things get really, really interesting. So the next slide, I go through some of the things about the interior. As many of you may know, department stores back in the day, really, really impressive spaces. It was quite the experience to go to department stores. I used to remember going to department stores with my grandmother, and it was like super fun. And you go and you have lunch, and everything was so fancy, and you get dressed up to go. And now you can walk in there in pajamas and Crocs if you want to, or no shoes, really, if you want to. So this level of style and design being put into something is a foreign concept now. So it was very shocking to see what it once was and to see this level of attention and detail being put into something like this, and then to walk into it now and see what it's become. So we'll go into current. What we're seeing here is what you see today. There's not been a lot of exterior changes. What we see is some bracing has been added to the bell tower. There's also been some communications work that's been done to the bell tower that's not really visible from the public right away. They've also switched out all of the original doors to more modern kind of steel and glass doors for safety and security, I'm sure. All the entrances reflect these same types of doors that you're seeing on the right-hand side. And the interior looks like every single Macy's you've ever been into in the United States. Everything looks exactly the same. We have these beautiful drop ceilings now, and the cosmetics counter looks nothing like it once did. And then we have these retail clothing areas on the upper floor, And we do still have kind of cool-looking escalators and elevators, but those have both also been replaced. They remain in the same locations as the originals, but all of the hardware that was originally there has been taken out and upgraded. The store was renovated first in the 1980s, and then again in the 1990s, and again in the 2000s. So a lot of change on the interior has happened over the years for this building, which has really disrupted the original design of it. For this building, we have kind of an interesting thing to think about, because when we look at historic department stores, we can't just look at the exterior, which is what we're used to dealing with. We have to look at both the interior and the exterior, because they were designed to be an all-inclusive building. They weren't designed independently. It was all supposed to work together. It was all an experience. So with department stores, we have a broad pattern of history, and we have the architect and the architecture to look at for this one. So on broad patterns of history, a couple of different things to talk about. We have suburban development with La Cumbre Plaza. Clearly an important event in the history of Santa Barbara, but suburban development is not important historically, and it's not unique to Santa Barbara. Suburban development happened everywhere. It happened in every city. It was just an expansion that happened post-war. So it's not something that is just happening in Santa Barbara. And department stores coming into suburban areas, also not unique to Santa Barbara, kind of happening everywhere as well. The department stores that came to Santa Barbara were also not really unique in that the Robinson's chain, this was actually their 8th store that they built. So it was not like this was the first Robinson's store that was built. And then they went on to design 10 more stores. So it was just kind of in the middle of their process of growing and developing over the years. The other concept that we have here is architecture and the architects. So what we can tell from the architecture is it's clearly a new formalist style. It is very late for new formalism. It's 1967, and it is a somewhat modest example of new formalism. So we do see some of those kind of classic elements like the columns, and we do see kind of that monumental scale with the use of concrete. But it is very watered down when you look at other public buildings and things like that that are using new formalism. It does have the character-defining features. It is recognizable, but it's just not great. And then we have the architects. So some of you may or may not be familiar with these two architects. Most people have heard of William Pereira and the firm Pereira & Associates. But Jen Wong and Max Horowitz are actually quite famous architects. They've done a lot of very beautiful modern buildings, many in Los Angeles, many in San Francisco. And their aesthetic is very modern. This building is not really representing their work. It is representing the Robinson commercialized, standardized design plan. By this point, Robinson has decided what their stores are going to look like, and they're putting them out there. In reading the materials for this project, it appears that the only things that Wong and Horowitz were making decisions about was the interiors. That they had some call about the interior designs and they weren't really making exterior decisions because the Robinson stores look almost identical from this point forward. So a lot of that exterior decisions they're not really making, and this looks nothing like any of their other designs. So I think this is one of those, I like to call them keep the lights on projects, and not really one that they were super excited about. We also have Ernest Hahn, who some of you may have heard of. La Cumbre Plaza was one of his very early development projects. He went on to design many, many different development projects throughout Southern California. He was very prolific in his projects. This project, while it was early, it was kind of him getting the bugs worked out, I think, because he didn't really go the way that he did with most of his projects. His projects were known for being amenities-based. They had things like skating rinks. They had like entertainment venues. They would have daycare centers and movie theaters, things like that to get people to come for different reasons. But this one always seemed to be focused around the traditional restaurant and shopping. So they didn't really have any of those other like special amenities that his other ones did. And because this shopping center has been modified so many times, it doesn't really reflect Ton's plan from 1967 at all at this point. I mean, it looks like any modern shopping center at this point. So that's kind of where we are on the significance for this one. And all of those things kind of play into the integrity analysis portion of it, where we do see that it retains the location. It does have exterior integrity with design, workmanship, and materials, but the interior is all lost. It doesn't have integrity of setting or feeling, and it doesn't have any historical associations. So we really don't have a lot to go on with this one from a significance standpoint. It is definitely something that happened. It is a building that was built in 1967, and it was built by some notable architects. It is New Formalist style, but it just doesn't really rise to the level of significance that's required for designation at local, state, or national level. So that's what I have for you today, and I welcome any questions. I can assure you no one has researched this building as much as I have, as you may tell by the very long DPR form.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Open public comment.
Thank you. I don't currently have any speaker slips, and I don't see any hands up online to speak. I also don't have any written correspondence on this topic, so back to you.
Thank you. Close public comment and bring it to the commission for questions.
I have a comment. No
Well, we'll
questions.
skip questions and go to comments. How's
Okay.
that?
Well, I like that list you made at the end. The whole property was a dairy, Durbiano Dairy, starting with Sears on the Hill before the freeway was put in. So I think that this is going to be an upgrade. I mean, I would welcome something different in that present place. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner?
I have a couple of comments, and first of all, I fully intend to support this. It's an excellent report. So my comments deal with the implications for other kinds of things like this that'll come before us. And the first deals with attribution. And I appreciate the precision of identifying Jin Wang and so forth. But William Pereira ran a huge office with multiple locations. And as is typical of large commercial offices like that, Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, Norman Foster, and so forth, it's a William Pereira building, even if he never touched a drawing. Early in my career, I worked in one of those offices, and there were studio chiefs, but it was very clear. So it's a William Pereira building. It doesn't change anything. The main comment that I have is, again, I support the report. I support the project, but I do not consider what happens on Outer State Street to set any kind of precedent for what might happen elsewhere along State Street. So we can say, yes, we can be supportive of this, but the argument that what we did at the 3800 block of State Street, so we can do it on another block of State Street, say the 700 block, is a non-starter for me. So I just want to make it clear that we're not setting any precedent here for future actions by accepting this report, which I strongly believe we should accept.
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner?
I have a question, just out of curiosity. In your report, you mentioned that when this project was proposed, that there was some neighborhood opposition. Out of curiosity, do you know more about that? And, was there I mean, it was pretty out in the country back in the late 50s or whatever, so.
The articles that I read about when it was first proposed to be out there was, how are people going to get to it? Because it was pretty far out.
Yep.
And there was a lot of development in the post-war era kind of happening in the San Roque neighborhood and the Rutherford track. So there was a lot of those folks that were really excited about it, but they were kind of worried about the traffic and like what that would mean. So it's kind of interesting that that's kind of becoming now like what is happening out there now, because we're back to the same kind of interesting thing, that this is a new area that's being developed and redeveloped, and it's really interesting to see how things always come full circle.
Yeah, it's interesting that traffic would be of concern, and there's no reason why it wouldn't be. I mean, you had little two-lane roads. Hollister was a two-lane road. It may have been State Street at that point, but traffic, and, we're still, all the way through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, traffic has always been a problem.
Oh, and I also read one thing, the Den of Thieves is what they called that area out there, the Den of Thieves.
Yeah, cows are really dangerous.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Do you have any idea why the front parking lot's sunken? Was that just to service the lower floor?
I
'Cause that's
have
a lot of-
absolutely no idea. It was not done anywhere else. He did do, in some of the earlier buildings that Pereira did, he used like a kind of a sunken parking area. And Horowitz actually did a lot of sunken parking in his designs, but it doesn't really work the same as the way they've done it before. Like, it wasn't meant to be any type of retail space. It was always parking. It didn't have anything to do with the retail
I
space.
think it could have been like, we need some fill on the other side, so we're going to take a chunk off the front, or?
It's hard to tell.
From an architect's standpoint or a planner's standpoint, it was nice of him to do that. We don't have a parking lot to view across from State Street to the building. It was, somebody gave some thought to that and was able to convince Ernie Hahn that this should be done, yeah.
And a lot of expensive retaining. Like, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Commissioner?
Thank you, Vice Chair Uli. I just wanted to say I am in line with and appreciate the comments by Commissioner Dordan. And I also would just add that I know of, because the people that used to own our house were the people who owned a place called Kelly's Corner. That was kitty corner from where Target is now, kitty corner from there. And they said about that place that it was just like a liquor store, and that people rode their horses out there. It was so out there that it was, dirt roads, and when you're speaking of traffic, that they would ride horses out there.
Different world. Any other comments? If none, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to accept the report on
I'll second it.
3805 State Street, Historic Assessment Report. Thank you.
Thank you. I heard a second.
And pardon my interruption,
Yes.
through the chair to the motion makers, would you like to include the comment in your motion, Commissioner Jordan's comment about the HLC's acceptance of this historic assessment
Absolutely.
does not necessarily endorse the same treatment for other
Yes.
parts of State Street?
Yes.
All right.
Not that that's going to do anything, but it's nice to be on the record, I suppose.
Yes, I'd like the Derbiano Dairy comment to be on the record, too.
All right. A one-horse town. Roll call, please.
Okay, Commissioner Dordan,
Yes.
Commissioner Drury,
Yes.
Commissioner Ensberg,
Yes?
Commissioner Lenvick,
Yes.
Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Uli.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent report.
Thank you, commissioners. It was good to see you.
Good to see you, too. We kept it within the rails, Counselor. Does anybody feel like they need an environmental break? Sure. All right. I know I could use an environmental break. Come back at 3 o'clock. January 29th, 2025 HLC hearing back to order with item number 5. A continued item, concept review of 301 East Yananali Street. No final appealable action will be taken at this meeting. Project compatibility findings will be required at some point in the future. And project was last reviewed July 12th, 2023. Welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us who you are and what are you
See if
doing here?
Kathy wants to.
I'd like
say
to
a
make
few
a couple of comments.
All right.
So this was before you 2 other times, but it has been revised somewhat, so we wanted to bring it back for another concept review. You did make comments on the modifications prior, but because it is revised and we're getting ready to bring this to Planning Commission, I would like you to make comments on the 2 modifications, so interior and front setback mods. And we would like you to determine whether they generally meet the project compatibility findings, and then let us know whether it's ready to go to Planning Commission.
All right. Before
you.
you get started, what if we read the minutes?
Great.
The commission supports the 2 requested modifications. The size, mass, bulk, height, and scale of the projects are appropriate. The project design will be consistent with the design guidelines. In general, the design of the project is compatible with desirable architectural qualities. The design of the project responds appropriately to established scenic vistas. The current design is compatible as the development can be as low as it is lower project. If I could read, then we would all understand what I'm saying. The amount of open space and landscaping does seem appropriate. It is important to revisit the story that was originally presented for a cohesive design. The hardscape, what does that mean?
I'm not sure.
The hardscape plan as presented is distracting. I made the motion, Ensberg seconded, motion carried.
Okay.
Let's see, Commissioner Ensberg. The description? No, it's part of the record. I don't need to read it. Please.
Brian Cornell.
Matthew Chua.
Dana Bauer.
So we're actually really pleased to be back to see you finally. We're very excited about this project. I think that comment may have referred to our original inspiration images. As you recall, this was kind of an Irving Gill-inspired building, and it really does continue to be. In fact, in some respects, I think it's much more successful now than it was. Let's go to the first site plan. So the big news is that we have removed the enormous underground parking that was here. We've kept the driveway exactly where it is. The 50-foot setback from Laguna Channel is still there. That is all restored riparian habitat. But we've basically reduced the size of the project slightly and have surface parking along the freeway side of the project. That lighter shaded area, in fact, just go ahead and move to the next slide, Matthew. So that is permeable paving in that parking lot area. We only have 1 mod remaining, actually. It is the parking that is in what is considered a front yard setback along the on-ramp. So that continues as it was originally. Previously, we had pushed the underground parking forward along Yananali to the 10-foot setback line. And so that was what the modification was for at the front yard previously. So that's gone away since the parking structure has gone away. The really good thing now, and you will hear from Dana soon, is we're all on Mother Earth now. So we get to do a lot of much more significant planting in our courtyard than what we had before. So next slide. This is all intended to be small boutique retail space. The owners who are here really want it to reflect Santa Barbara and, be have artisans and people that are Santa Barbarans in the space. There is a small amount of second floor. One is basically a restaurant in the upper right there, and that will have a deck facing towards the freeway, but more importantly, facing towards the mountain views, because there's just gorgeous mountain views, at 45 degrees to the street grid here. And then the other will be smaller, potentially some office, gym, different sort of uses on the second floor, but minimized. So our total square footage is a little less than 40,000 square feet. We're showing on this plan skylights and solar panels and mechanical because we were asked to show that, but I don't think you care really about that. Let's go to the elevations. So these are hard to read, I apologize, but this is basically the elevation along Yananali. So you can see the second floor beyond, but it is all one story along Yananali, and basically we've just created a modulation of the massing at different heights, and it is kind of splayed to the streetscape, so it has kind of a sawtooth pattern, as you noticed on the site plan, as it goes along the street. And then the lower elevation would be the Garden Street elevation. Again, one you really won't be able to see much because there's so much heavy landscaping there already existing, but that's what that looks like. And then the rear elevation facing the parking lot, you can see the second story elements on the left there is that restaurant space that I mentioned with the deck, and then on the right, those individual little office or gym type spaces. And the vertical circulation is in that little middle mass that has the archway in it. And then the bottom elevation is just that elevation that goes along the driveway. These are these are very minimal buildings. It's really all about the courtyard space inside. So next slide, just to give you an idea of the sections. Oh, these are the courtyard elevations. So you can kind of get a sense of the variation of the fenestrations that in the courtyard. We're anticipating that these will be steel windows. It's possible we may integrate some wood windows in this, but that is at least now the intent. And the sections, next page, give you just a sense of the massing relative to Yananali. So that upper, if you'll blow up up to the upper one there, and then we'll go down. So you can see the setback along Yananali and the scale of those buildings, and then as they step back to the second floor portions, that's the stair. The middle section is the stair coming down into the middle courtyard, and then this section below, the area that you see patio is actually, if you noticed, is an interior courtyard, not there, down there, yeah, is an interior courtyard for a potential restaurant in that location, which could be a really cool space. So let's go to the renders now. We have blown up elevations if you want to look at them. So these are important, certainly from your perception or viewpoint on mountain views. And again, I think we were fine before, and now I think it's actually improved a little bit as far as those mountain views. And then we also have on the bottom there a view of what you would see from the freeway. So not much change. In fact, I think the rock pile that was there when we took this photo was taller than the buildings that we're proposing. So next slide is the entry rendering, and I'm going to let Dana talk about this entrance courtyard. It's really one of the most important pieces of the project. We're really excited about this. This hasn't changed a lot from what you saw the last time, except there's been further articulation of the paving and the stairways and how the accessible path is achieved. But what this shows is that there's going to be very heavy landscaping along Yananali, and that is the desire to really ensconce this in that wealth of landscape. Next slide. So this is that vehicular entrance that runs along the creek. And again, we're not showing here the the actual ground planting, because that hasn't been completely determined at this point, but rest assured that there will be a lot of foreground planting to these plaster walls. Next slide, then, final slide for us is the parking lot side. So we're very excited about this archway that goes into the courtyard and then connects the two-story sections of the project. You can see this portion of paving will all be permeable paving, so we'll have to review that material with you. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dana to talk about the landscape.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Well, these are our revisions to the landscape plan, and we still have, as we originally presented, an idea about the local plant communities. Each side of the site is defined by its adjacent habitat, and so we have along Laguna Creek, we're maintaining the riparian habitat, the freshwater marsh. As we're along Yannon Alley and even along Garden, we're transitioning to a coastal meadow. And then wrapping around the backside or the freeway side of the site, we have oak woodland. And then if you're entering from the corner of Garden and Yannon Alley through that largest kind of courtyard, our idea is just that this is on the street level. This is kind of the biggest pedestrian welcome to the project. And as you move through that space, the landscape develops into a more kind of cultivated Mediterranean palette to kind of match the architecture and to have a relationship to the architecture. And then I think our most exciting addition is in direct response to our last meeting, which was about bringing more sculptural kind of eccentricity to the plant palette that was reflective of the neighborhood and a kind of artistic approach to the landscape. And so we were able to introduce in this new large space a desert garden, a cactus garden with a lot of extraordinary specimens. And included in that is a kind of smaller gathering space at the interior. We can go through the plant palette if anyone is interested. This is just showing our beginnings of each of the palettes and the plant communities that I mentioned, from the freshwater marsh, Mediterranean, oak woodland, and coastal meadow. And then zooming in, so this shows the real plants and kind of screening and filtering at this main pedestrian entrance. And what we're hoping, what we're hoping is that this is both a kind of welcome and also a gathering space that really is a kind of community amenity and introduces gathering at the street level. So what you're seeing in blue is what would be a gathering space around a water feature. And then over to the right where you kind of see the stairs ascending, that's the beginning of the procession that takes you through the courtyards, through the project, the kind of alley there. So here's once you get up onto that kind of the retail level, let's say, where all the shops are and the entrances are. And so we're transitioning also between here in the foreground, a stone, which is coordinated with the Santa Barbara stone. And then we're moving into a terracotta paver, which would have a lot of sort of granularity and articulation. A raised planter, which would serve as a bench. And that's sort of our first gathering. You can see in the key plan down on the bottom right, that's the area that we are. And we're looking at this point toward the cactus garden. Yeah. This is a little bit further on the path. And here we're looking to the cactus garden where you're seeing a brachychiton and a Dracaena draco and these incredible plants, which we hope to be like an amazing destination for this project. An aerial view shows how that desert garden opens to a smaller gathering area inside, and also shows the stairs up, which there's that arch is actually a bridge which connects the two sides of the project, and we're able to plant on that. We have planters on there to kind of spill over the arch and create that welcome from the parking. which you see here. And we also, we're looking at we're kind of in developing the materials now, and so we have a mix of kind of tone-on-tone things, which are terracotta, mission tile, some glaze, some matte, and so we're hoping to get a lot of interest in detail in the hardscape as well.
So I think that ends our presentation. Just our goal is to, to get to the Planning Commission hopefully soon. We've gone through a lot of iterations through the planning process, so obviously this was a change in the design, doing away with the underground parking. I might note, by the way, that pursuant to AB 2097, we wouldn't have to have any parking for this project, but we are providing it anyway. So I think it's going to be, this project is going to be a really important anchor ultimately to the funk zone. And as you recall, originally when we talked about it, we kind of wanted to straddle that funk zone aesthetic with a project that is in the Historic Landmarks Commission purview. So I'm hoping you will be able to send us on to Planning Commission with positive comments, and then we will be back to you to pour through the details.
Thank you. Does that complete your presentation?
Yes.
Thank you.
Vice Chair, could I just ask for
Yes.
clarification? I had mentioned the front yard setback. In the applicant letter, it does say that the bike parking is within the setback. Maybe that's just a holdover from the past.
Oh, no, it
If-
is. So,
it
yeah,
is.
along Garden, there is that, so I apologize, Kathy. So that would require a mod. So we do still have 2 mods.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. Open public comment.
Okay, I don't currently have any speaker slips, but if someone in the audience would like to speak, they can come up to the podium now. No movement. I do have a hand raised on Zoom, so we can go ahead and allow her to talk. This is a public comment from Brittany Zajic.
Welcome, Brittany.
Hi there. Thank you for having me to the Historic Landmarks Commission. I'm glad to see that the underground parking has been removed from this project. Can't help but assume that's because the other massive concrete that the HLC approved for Canal was the second largest hotel in the city of Santa Barbara. Across the street is actually tied up in a lawsuit because of it. Cornell continues to push through neighborhood changing projects for our out-of-town developers without answering the fundamental question of what community benefit this is going to offer. This is going to be a stop for freeway travelers to use EV charging. Why are we allowed to add 40,000 square footage of non-residential development without even a single conversation of workforce housing? There are not even workers for the existing local businesses in the funk zone. The funk zone workforce has no housing options as it is today. The closest grocery store to this community is over a mile away. When has there been any community meeting to discuss what this is a fundamentally changing project? And you know, what is 2 miles away is from the same developers as the Post, whereas we've all seen is Los Angeles-based developers that have moved out all of the local businesses to bring in their LA luxury goods and restaurant chains. Stop letting these Los Angeles-based developers turn our home into Santa Monica. The Historic Landmark Commission is the only body between this project and Planning Commission. Cornell used the excuse that the hotel across the street was too far along once at the Planning Commission to make any meaningful changes to his first massive concrete. This commission already did a disservice to the funk zone by approving the second largest hotel in the city of Santa Barbara without a single concession and understanding the compatibility of this to the neighborhood. Let's mandate workforce housing, let's start a conversation about it, and let's serve the funk zone community, not these developers. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have any written correspondence on this item, so back to you.
Thank you. We'll close public comment.
Mr. Chair, I just want to, maybe Kathy would want to clarify, but housing is not allowed in this zone.
Thank you.
That is correct.
Bring it to the commission for questions.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner.
Yes, as far as the landscape goes, how many native species are interwoven in the bouquet?
Are,
Or is there any?
for sure. So the native species are mostly around the perimeter of the project. So what you're seeing all the way to the driveway would be, is the freshwater marsh species. And then we have coastal meadow, which I'm guessing is about 75% native. That's usually our goal as a practice, because native species are resilient in some cases and fragile in others, and so we try to do a blend of climate-appropriate plants.
Depending on drainage and so on, yeah. All right, thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
a question about, I guess it's the Laguna Channel, the eastern edge of this. How accessible is that if I'm visiting? I ask because whether you make it accessible or not, you're going to wind up with a lot of people in khaki pants and canvas hats and binoculars certain times of the year who want to bird along there. Is that an accessible part of the project?
No, it's not, because we're not allowed to have
That's what I
it
wondered.
be accessible. We're being forced to put a fence, as you see here. Two fences, yeah.
Electrified?
To prevent, yeah.
So the birding community will just have to hop the fences? Okay.
Well, there will be a gate. You can see the access road that we put in on the upper side there, so that is for Public Works, because there is a sewage easement along there, and they want access to the creek area, so that would be the location that you would be able to get access, and presumably that the city will control that gate.
Okay. And another question, I know this is here for concept review, but I'm curious if you have thought about a design strategy for signage.
We really haven't, because I think we want to minimize the signage. I mean, I think there's going to have to be a sign designating that driveway for certain, and then there will probably be some, minor sign maybe at the corner where the courtyard is, but I think otherwise, I'm imagining the signage will really be interior in the courtyard. But that's the extent that we've really thought about it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? Commissioner?
Yeah, I'll build on my last question about signage. I'm very supportive of the project. I like the fact that you're using Irving Gill as a design inspiration. And I think that at its best, Gill's work has a kind of very disciplined, restrained elegance, and it works with a rich landscaping palette. So there's much I like about this. But I would advise you to think seriously about the signage regulations for your retail clientele, because I think what could disrupt that is to have 12 different kinds of signs as you're walking through the project. And maybe that's a uniform signage approach, even if it's just about lettering or scale or whatever, but to have each place have its own big, different kind of sign would disrupt what the concept seems to suggest, which is one coherent, continuous spatial experience.
Thank you. Commissioner Drury? Your light's on.
It is. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that could be solved with perhaps just a wayfinding system, somehow just like a signpost, very reticent. I was going to say that I agree with Commissioner Dordan about the certain Moorish elegance to this project. And it's very welcoming. I appreciate it and I'm supportive of it.
Commissioner Levy?
Yeah, I don't believe that Irving Gill's work is recognized as being Santa Barbara's style of architecture.
No, it's not.
And I realize we gave this glowing comments previously, but it's, to me, it's unfortunate there isn't a little bit more detail, which could be, if you squinted your eyes, you could look at it and say, yeah, that's Santa Barbara. I'm sure that the architect could find ways to do that, but it's pretty Irving Gill. And the thing about Irving Gill's work, if I think hard enough and try to reflect on it, is it had a lot of, it sat in landscaped areas. Now, whether or not this is enough landscaping here to reflect what Gill's work really, what its standards were, I don't know. But it would be interesting to see, a little bit of nod towards what is more traditional architecture, which has happened in the funk zone. The stuff in the funk zone, I think, generally has, recognized Santa Barbara's architecture. So that's one point. The second point is, and it's your marketing and whatever, but I think that you are missing something by not having more exposure to the street from the standpoint of what's happening inside. You've got, on that western end, you've got 3 or 4 arches and windows behind, but once you go east from there, it's pretty much blank wall except for a few occasional windows. And I think that people driving by are going to wonder, am I at the right spot? What's happening in there? One driveway, you don't see parking from Yananali Street, you don't see anything from Garden Street, but you don't see parking. So you've got to, what is the attraction that's going to say people really want to go there? And I think that if you had more windows, more exposure, more light, more activity, more stuff going on, that it would be to your advantage. Architecturally, I could care less. But I'm just saying, to your advantage, if there was more stuff going on, more window openings, more, more display, more light, more color, more stuff, it would be attractive, and it would represent, it would give a good representation of what you should expect. When you're in the parking lot, you're relying on that single one entry area to be the attraction to bring people in to a big, long area where you've got retail. And again, from the parking lot on the, on the back of those buildings, there's relatively little windows, relatively little which says there's activity and life going on inside this development. And I think from the standpoint of marketing and sales and interest, that you might want to think about putting more there, more activity on the face of the building, from the standpoint of windows and light and color and displays or whatever. Even though all of your activity is going to be from the interior to get into the buildings, what's attracting the eye? What's, I drive in and, I drive around and I can park over there, but, I don't see what's going on. A lot of blank walls. A little area there where you've got, I think it's actually, without the elevations, it's not even a large opening into the garden area on the inside. So those are comments that don't reflect on the architecture. My only architecture comment, it reflects on the marketing. The only architecture comment is I wish you would maybe lean a little bit more towards some of the features that are Santa Barbara, as opposed to the strength of Irving Gill, which you're exposing in your architecture. My only comments. Others may have other comments.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Commissioner.
Well, it came to mind that we haven't talked about the lighting, have we?
No.
I think there's an opportunity there to put some, dare I say, romance or poetry on those otherwise beautiful blank walls. accentuation of the arches through lighting. I think that's an important component. That's a comment.
Thank you. Any other comments? Schreienberg.
Well, thank you for the work. Thank you for coming back and coming to show us what you've done. I'm happy to see about the parking changes. Could we look at the rendering from within the courtyard there, one of those, please? Yeah, that's fine, any one of those. I agree with much of what Commissioner Lenvik has said. And I feel that I can't figure out whether I'm confused. Is it about the building or is it about the landscape? The landscape is, way, way, way developed. I feel like, it's a little bit of a Disneyland thing. There's this world and this plant and that plant. And I don't know if that's the most powerful way to deal with it. Whether, you've got this project, it's about this building, it's basically all white, and then it has, heavy landscaping. But it just doesn't draw me in. It doesn't, and I think what Commissioner Lenvik said is really true, that you don't get a glimpse of it. It's all about this courtyard, but you don't get a glimpse of it from different places. So I think you're, that may not be helping you. I just feel like something's missing. It's like when I first looked at it, it just felt a little bit plain and kind of bland, and the building itself. So I'm like, but then you have all the landscape covering it up. So I'm like, well, are we just pushing the architecture back and just letting the landscape be the whole thing, or what exactly? So I feel like more art, and I think, we said this before at the last times we were here. To me, I always think of like my favorite landscape guy in the world, which is Roberto from Brazil, who did the incredible big patterns. And I just love that idea of just a very large, big, singular graphic pattern. It doesn't have to be that, but it could be many other things. So to me, there's this whole rug issue with the paving that I just feel like that could be something really amazing. And, and then, of course, it was brought up about the signage. Is there, what kind of color is there? Are there flags? Are there, the windows are white, everything's white that I see. So I just feel like the detail, maybe a little more richness, something just feels missing to me. And so, maybe more color, maybe there could be Commissioner McClure just got back from Oaxaca. All the buildings are bright colors, and maybe that's something to think about. Like on the inside, maybe it could be really where you come from this outside, and then it just explodes when you get inside. So I mean this, maybe this is the headache of being on HLC, right? I mean this in the, to be helpful and to, for you to think about and see, to get the best project that you can possibly have. So that's what my comments are from a place of help. So it just doesn't feel to me like a place I'd feel drawn to go, given all the other opportunities. So those are my thoughts, and I guess I'll just stop there, but thank you.
I just want to clarify, the windows would not be white. I think that was this rendering
Okay.
technique, just to show the landscape, and
Okay.
the windows will not be white.
Okay.
Commissioner Limbeck.
Yeah, you look at this building and you say, why don't you use the colors that Luis Barragan used? Or what's the is it Longretta?
Legaretta.
Legaretta? The stuff that he's done is mind-blowing. Now, you might have trouble getting it approved here, but if you introduce those kind of colors, you know, that what he's doing, that would certainly catch the eye. I don't know if you want to go there or not, but it would certainly catch the eye. When I looked down the center courtyard that Commissioner Ensberg was commenting on, I don't see personal scale, you know, stuff you want to get under awnings or, you know, not awnings, but, you know, it's just, there's trees and white walls and arched openings that maybe have a little depth to them, but you don't have that stuff that you want to get yourself under personal scale wise. It's deck and walls and sky, and then of course the landscaping, which, what did Frank Lloyd Wright say about landscaping? I don't know.
He said that doctors bury their mistakes, architects plant them.
Okay, thank you, yeah. But Longretta, and there are probably other Mexican architects, I'm not that familiar, but it's, some of that stuff would really, you know, it seems like it wants to plaster itself on these buildings. I don't.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that in looking at this that I think we haven't yet had a chance to develop, and I just wonder if you think it would address some of the issues and questions that you have, is that we really want the hardscape to be very articulated, warm, and it have a kind of really active role in this project, which in our renderings it does not yet. So I don't know if you think that would satisfy some of what I think are very great points that you've brought up, and I agree. But like in our collaboration and conversations, to have a really sculptural, eccentric landscape, to have a really granular, directional hardscape, and then to have also an animated, you know, building maybe is too much. So I think we were trying to create a hierarchy in attention.
I think the paving, you know, is important, but you don't see it from, you know, the street or whatever. You know, it's. I'm saying I want to get people in this complex. I want them to. We got to go down there where, you know, where all those bright colors are, or we got to go down there where, you know, the stuff's in the windows or whatever. I don't know. It just, to me, it's. I want this to be successful. And I don't know how you.
As do we.
I don't know how you do. I don't know how you.
I never thought I'd hear you complain about white.
Well, no, I think big buildings should be white, and other and smaller buildings colored. But I'm saying in this case, you have taken a direction which we have accepted and bought into that I think needs to be. It needs some way to get their eyeballs on it more. I don't know what that is.
Commissioner Jordan.
I think this
I'll
is
loan you my book on Longretto, if I can find it. You've got one.
I think we've bumped into this problem before. The drawings are not yet telling the full story, and that this set is telling us that the landscaping is a critical component of the experience of this place. And I get that. And then some of the comments are, but what is it like? What do I see on there's too much wall space, blank wall, and so forth. So that the next iteration, the drawings have to tell more of a story, or we have to see some more of that. But I also think that's possible to do, that it's just at this stage, the decision or what we're being persuaded about is the importance of the landscaping. And I buy that, I support that. And in terms of you know, this presentation, this round is also telling me that the vision is to have a quite special internal experience, the interiorizing of this. And I get that, but it raises the issue of how do people know that there's a special experience there. I lived in New Orleans for a while, and Piazza d'Italia by Charles Moore was originally to be a centerpiece of a larger development, and it was difficult to figure out from, you couldn't see it until you were right on it. And I think that's the issue that we keep bumping into here. But this makes a very persuasive case that the landscaping is crucial to this scheme, not an add-on.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I may make a suggestion, I'm no architect, I'm a painter. But what if, in terms of color accents, you painted the inside of the arches? Different colors. Just an arch of color. As a suggestion, different colors, not just one. That's what I would do. Thank you.
You don't need to answer that because we're not here to design your project for you.
I understand, and
I'm here. I'm not just here to answer questions.
All right, thank you.
Oh, you're the owner.
I'm the owner.
Oh.
Hi, how are you guys? And I
Good.
appreciate everyone's concern for the commercial viability of the project.
Got to work.
God honest. And I can tell you, we've now, the first time we came and saw you, we were the newbies. As the woman on the phone said, we're from Los Angeles, which is a terrible place, you know. But now we're really community members. We open the Post, which I suppose some folks don't like, but I can tell you with absolute factual assurance is a massive success, both in terms of the folks that have, and we're not even really open, we're just starting. But the amount, if you build something beautiful as this project is, it doesn't need to scream from the street, because once folks come in, and we have methodologies for bringing people in, people come back because they're having a great experience on the interior. And the whole point of this project is, I think, in the first approval, when you sent us to Planning Commission previous to all the state laws changing and what brought us back here, was exactly what you're seeing here. The entire front is the same, and it is a simple concept, I agree. But to Dana's point, we can't build beautiful, mature landscaping. My construction people just told me they saw this and they doubled our budget for plants that they thought we were gonna have to have. And also beautiful paving, which is this terracotta, which picks up, I think, on some of the comments about making it, what is Santa Barbara? It's the white stucco. It's in all the design guidelines, you guys know way better than I do. But terracotta, stucco, right? We're taking these elements and trying to do something that does make that transition. And I suppose the point that I wanted to make was, all this is heard and I believe will be developed as we keep going. I think signage criteria, when we come back to you final, I'd like, just as a to-do, to make sure that we show you that. If you go to the Post, I think you'll see a very uniform signage criteria. I think it's well worth a visit to understand just where our heads are at, that this isn't going to be sullied up with all kinds of things. And I think it's all very relevant and important feedback, as you guys have always had. The only thing that I would say is, this is effectively a very similar project to the previous one. I think that we have some work to keep going on. It's been a long road, and we're really looking forward to continuing to push and obviously come back and show you all the things that we've worked on in the interim. Sorry to monopolize the conversation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
My only clarification is signage is not our deal. You just have to tell us you're working on it, because some other committee is going to worry about the size and shape and color and all
Still,
that. all that
I'll show it
business.
to you anyway.
Commissioner Cooper.
Yeah, could we go back to just one perspective of a representative landscape, maybe from the front?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, is it, it seems, is it your intention that it would be that wispy and that just kind of, it's almost like you put a whole bunch of plants in a blender and you just poured them all out? And that's in comparison to like maybe one species of a plant in one planter and a much more crisp, like the architecture? Is that intentional, or is that just kind of the, like where this rendering is?
I think it's a little bit of the rendering, but it is our intention, though, to not, I think if we did this building and then did a very uniform sort of not pro forma, but single species or single concept landscaping, I do think we'd almost feel like a corporate campus. Something, there needs to be a hierarchy of design, I think Dana's previous point. And, they're the big guns for us. When we want to do the best project, I think they're the best landscape architects in California, if not the West Coast. And and every project that they've done just comes out in spectacularly. So
I just wanted to mention that.
No,
so
it's
that
very
you keep
fair.
it in mind as you move forward.
it's always a bummer. You guys do this way more than I do, but the renderings don't always.
You know, I wanted.
It's okay. What can you do?
I can tell you exactly what happened with this rendering, is that because so what we're doing is we're transitioning from the coastal meadow plant community to Mediterranean at the interior, but it got wispy because we wanted to be able to show what was happening in the interior so that you could see the corner of the water feature. So it's really a problem of visualization, but I very much appreciate your comment because we struggled a lot with this rendering.
And I gotta just say something about the landscaping. If you guys have spent time at Lotus Land, which I'm sure you have, or the Huntington Library in Pasadena, yeah, you could say, oh, it's Disneyland because there's like all these like really eclectic things, and they're mixing desert with chaparral, with lagoon. I mean, both of those places do that, but they're like the place that everyone wants to go. Like, I just think that we need to take the concepts of design that we all love about Santa Barbara, but not replicate them literally every time. And I think that the architecture and landscape here picks up all the norms that we love, the design things, but puts them in a way that I think will really be interesting for people, and that does bridge the gap between the funk zone and all the other architecture in the city. So I'm just extremely pleased with this. I think it's very similar to the last project that we got the thumbs up on, and anyway, it's been like a year and a half, so I wanted to give my enthusiasm.
You can hear that Joey is passionate about this.
Yes.
Thank you.
I would love to see shadows cast by eucalyptus trees on these walls. That's not what your concept is, but
All right. I'd like to get the commission to chime in on the two modifications, parking in the front yard setback and bike parking in the setback. Just a sense that you're okay with those two ideas. We want to make sure we send feedback to the planning commission so they know how we feel.
Yes.
Yes.
Looks like we're Commissioner Hansberg.
Yes, I'm fine with the setbacks.
All right.
I have to say that after this long discussion here we've had, we're not only concerned about what's on the inside, it's what does it look like from the street? You know, most of the historic stuff that we look at, if, you know, we want to preserve, if you have a historic building, for example, you would not touch the front of the building. Whatever you do behind there, you can kind of do a lot of things. But the view from the street is, I think we would all agree, extremely important. And as you go down the street here on Yananali, it's just a bunch of box walls. And I don't think it's very inviting. I don't think it feels Santa Barbara. I don't know what you do. I think you have a lot of options. Like I said before, I think it just feels like there's a layer missing. Something is missing. And I have been over to the Post, and I've checked it out, and I think it's really great. I think it's come out really well. I don't think it's anything like this. It's completely different. Maybe there's some principles that might be similar, but it's a very, very different building. It's an old building. It was there before it was renovated. But you've done a great job on it, and I think, you know, from all of our collective work together, it came out really well, and I hope for great success. This is a completely different animal, and I think that I have concerns about how it feels, the austerity of it from the street, and whether it will be compelling visually. I mean, that's our responsibility as HLC to give comment about that. So it feels like there's some level of detail that you've got an amazing designer here that can do pretty much anything. So I'm sure you can figure out how to do that, but right now, it just feels very bland, and I don't think, and to Commissioner Lenvick's point, I don't think it helps to pull people in to understand, give you a glimpse of something in there.
The Post, and the Post.
We don't want to continue the back and forth.
Yes, no, heard, thank you. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
So I just, I really feel very strongly about this, and I'm trying to say it in the best way possible, but I think that there is, the building needs to be more Santa Barbara somehow.
Along the Yananali elevation specifically?
Well, this elevation we're looking at right there and along Yananali, probably on the backside, it's not as critical. And, but I think that some of the comments that Commissioner Lenvik said are very important, how you get in there. And you have that one arch, which is interesting, could be more interesting. And then what do you do from there? And then as far as the interior of it, if you want to blow it open with a bunch of color, whatever you want to do, that doesn't really, it's not as relevant. But how do you send that little clue to people? So that's.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just like to say one thing, and it's really important, is I've spent a lot of time, needless to say, we've been working on this for a long time. Yananali past Garden is not a pedestrian street, and it never will be. This is what the anchor of this project is. And it is the anchor of the Funk Zone. And people will come to drive here and park here, no doubt. But there isn't, we don't want there to be activity and the like along Yananali. It is not that kind of a street, and it never will be because of what's beyond. So think about that, as we're critiquing this.
Comment. Commissioner Jordan?
No comment.
All right. Just saw your light on, so I don't. Commissioner Drury, did you have it?
I was going to, but I had enough.
Commissioner McClure?
No.
All right. The staff has also asked us, thank you. Staff has also asked us to chime in on the compatibility findings, so I don't know if you want to put those up on the screen, and I'll phrase it as, does anybody have an issue with any of the findings? We don't need to go through all of them, but does anybody have a particular issue with the findings? Guidelines, character, size, mass, bulk, height, and scale, sensitivity to resources around it, views, or landscaping. Commissioner Insberg.
I guess the point I would, the one I would highlight is number 2. I think that's questionable, how compatible it is with the architecture. I think that the solution is not difficult. I don't think that that it would be hard to bring it in, but this is the point that I was making a moment ago of what can you do to bring it in more in line to be more compatible with the city.
All right. Anyone else have any particular issues? All right. Then I would say that the commission doesn't have any particular issues with the findings.
Well, wait.
You have an issue now?
Well, Commissioner Ensberg said in her mind, there's a problem with that. I guess
We'll make that in the comments. And
Thank you.
Send it along.
Thank you.
Staff has also made a note, so they're listening. Nobody's deaf here. All right. Have we done everything that you would like us to do? There's no
That's fine.
motion, but we'll send the comments through, and I've made the following comments, and if I've missed any or misstated them,
Before you begin, you should make a motion to continue it to the Planning Commission with those comments, if you feel like it's ready for Planning Commission, or you would continue it back to the HLC for another concept review.
I'll make that motion.
To continue to the Planning Commission?
Excuse me?
To continue to the Planning Commission?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second that.
For clarification, Planning Commission's only concern is the modifications.
Correct.
Thank you.
No, I'm sorry. No, there's
Not
a
correct.
coastal development permit, a development plan, and the modifications,
planning-related things.
Yeah.
land use approvals.
All right.
They're not going to make them take the parking away, are they?
No.
Lots changed in 5 years.
All right, let's see if I can get through this. All right, the commission thanks the applicant team for their time, presentation, and work to get to this hearing. Thank you. Comment number 2, consider activating the parking and street sides of the development. Number 3, consider more Spanish Revival detailing or architectural expression. Next, consider lighting the architecture. Next, landscaping seems too busy. Simplify the design if possible. Next comment, consider more color. Next comment, consider bold patterns in the hardscape. Next, modification front yard and bike parking seem to be okay for the commission. And finally, the various findings seem to be acceptable to the commission with the exception of architectural compatibility. Did I miss anything?
Could we clarify by one member or maybe two members?
I concur with what Commissioner Ensberg has said. I think it's close, but it's not there from the standpoint of the requirements that are expected for EPV.
Really?
Well, as I mentioned before, Irving Guild is not an approved or recognized design for EPV.
I would say that some members of the commission have issues with architectural compatibility.
Okay.
And as a side comment, I would say that this commission, if we're trying to be consistent, have always relaxed the letter of our guidelines to the spirit of the guidelines on the outer reaches of our jurisdiction. We've tried to hold to the guidelines in the strict EPV, but on the outer reaches, we've relaxed that demand. So we want to be consistent. We gave the applicant a direction the last time they were here. We seemed to like the architecture because it was on the outer reaches.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't now change our mind and say we don't like it.
I agree.
Yeah. Did the secretary record all those comments? All right. Roll call, please.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jordan,
Yes.
Commissioner Drury,
Yes.
Commissioner Ensberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Lenvik,
Yes.
Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Uli.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good luck with that project.
He makes a hell of a chair, doesn't he?
Yeah, I was gonna say, moving things along. All business.
Well, we don't have time to waste.
Thank you, guys. Nice to see everybody.
Yep.
Keep them in line.
Thank you.
All right. We're not too far behind. We're doing okay. Nobody even looked at those, did they? Brought them for no reason. They look edible, though.
They're very tasty looking.
Did you make donuts?
No. Samples. All right. This brings us to our last item, if I can get to the right part of the agenda. Item number 6, 517 Chapala Street. Project design approval is requested. Project compatibility findings are required. Project was last reviewed by the commission December 18th, 2024. Are there any comments by the commissioners? Do you have to, you're okay? Did you have to?
No, I'm
All right. All right. What am I doing? I introduced it. Staff comments, thanks. I'll get myself back together here.
Thank you, Vice Chair Uli. So we'll go over the minutes in a moment. I'm Pilar Plummer, Associate Planner with the city. And just as a reminder, so this is the second time you're reviewing this project. They are asking for project design approval at this hearing. It is a housing project under the state density bonus program for the state, as well as the AUD program. They're proposing 15 units. Some things that I think are important to note since the last hearing is that they did incorporate more bicycle parking into the project. So the standard requirement is 1 per unit, so that's 15. And they're proposing a total of 64 bicycle spaces within the project. Other than that, they've included some additional sections and renderings which the applicant will present for you. If you have any questions, I'll be here. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. If you'd introduce yourself and why you're here.
My name is Keith Nolan, and I'm here on behalf of the owners of the property.
Good afternoon, everybody. Scott Martin with RRM Design Group, architect, the one to blame, those sorts of things. Happy to be back in front of you. Really appreciate the opportunity for the continuance last time. And hopefully we're here today to say, look, we did it, I think. I think we're feeling good. So we'd love to sort of share with you what we heard last time and how we responded. With that, I'll try to be brief.
All right, if I can interrupt you,
Please.
we'll review the minutes so that you can speak to the points of the minutes.
Okay.
The commission thanks the applicant for bringing the project and is supportive of more residential development. It seems to be a common thing for us. The commission thanks the applicant for being amenable and continuing to work through the next review. The commission needs more information on a number of areas. A, provide at least 3 sections, one from Chapala to the alley through the main entry and courtyard, one from a front of the 3-story building to show the facade facing Chapala, and one that cuts through the courtyard and parallel to that cuts through the building to show those relationships and the relationships to neighbors on either side. B, provide a streetscape elevation showing at least 531 Chapala Street building and the 2 historic Italianate buildings on either side. C, provide additional 3D views for Brinkerhoff. 4, or D, renderings can be diagrammatic but need elevations to scale. Provide elevations of all sides of the building, especially of the 2-story or more sided. Boy, we really yacked, didn't we? Continue detailed studies, include good reference photographs for details, restudy the metal canopy as the commission generally frowns upon these things, study the Juliet balconies and come back with examples, have 8-inch minimum thickness walls, recess the windows and doors, study the mechanical equipment and how it's to be screened. The commission understands that they cannot ask for vehicle parking and are not requiring additional bike parking, but would ask the applicant to consider it. Study the bike entrance to have double doors or large entries so it's easily accessible. Study ways such as eave overhangs to design in a way that addresses the small building at 517 Chapala Street and the larger building at 531. Study having softer textures on the plaster, study the awnings and consider the use of the element, study the balance of awnings and the height of the railings relative to the windows, provide reference photographs. Study the visual plaster below the windows and above the eaves and bring closer to 2 feet. Study, it's hard to read when the words are moving. Study softening and transitioning the properties by using larger massings of plantings such as bay laurels between 531 and the project site. Consider using tile as a detail around the windows or the entry to bring more poetry into the building and tie into the neighboring property at 531. The roof should be 2-piece clay tile all the way, not just at the end. House butler, I was absent. Motion carried. And I did watch that wonderful movie. Now you can continue. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a great recap, and I hope the presentation today kind of shows you how we've addressed and responded to those things. I'd like to say we did 100%. I think we're close to 100%. And
I'll let you know, I'm sure.
I have no doubts. So I just, hopefully everybody received updated package. There is a completely new updated drawing set, including the additional drawings you requested. There's also an updated visual simulation in lieu of story poles, so that also includes some of the additional drawings you requested, as well as the street front elevation. That includes the superimposed images of buildings on the side, but also go through some of those.
Can I just interrupt for clarification? When you say additional, that was in the packet that was for this.
So
we've had.
Through the chair, Commissioner, and also to the applicant. So I know that there's going to be a presentation that the applicant's going to go through. There is the plan set that was linked to the agenda and posted online. And at the end of that set included some additional sheets for your reference. Yeah.
Perfect. And we're happy to go through any of that as needed. And then we've listened to your design considerations and found where we feel are applicable ways to integrate, as well as some comparisons as to what we had and where we're at now, including some example details, photography requested by this commission. So we're excited to show you where we're at and happy to hear back from you. Started with just some of the clarity in street elevation and contextualism. Wanted to make sure we actually went back and pulled out some previous drawings that we were able to grab to help with height. This is a photo next to a flat 2D elevation on the bottom there. So we did our best to sort of superimpose the roof of the building next door. Is hard to see, so we took the drawing of the actual entitled, and you can see the eaves line up. You just don't see that vertical portion of the roof, much like you won't ours either when you get out of elevation and into 3 dimensions. But this shows contextually sort of the stair stepping that is happening along the street, and the variety of roof line and heights. As well, we have, and I tried to highlight it in red in the design package. It's in a dashed line that I thought appeared a little light when I actually saw it printed. But you can see this is a section through the front 1- and 2-story portion of our building with updated plate heights, head heights, and what we believe is head to window window head to eave relationship that we'll get into a little bit more in detail, but it is much closer to that 2 feet, slightly over, just based on what we think we need as a insulation heel in that building design, but we can get into that. They are all consistent. That was something not specifically called out in the notes, but something that was asked for by this commission. So distance from window header to eave is all consistent, regardless of floor, finished floor level on things like the entry into the courtyard and whatnot. So we'll get a little bit more into that as we go, but just wanted to show that we have that additional detail, and hopefully you can see some contextual relationship as well. The other 2 sections requested was another section looking the same way through the 3-story or the rear portion of the project. We have made some roof changes from the gable to the hip. We really like the relationship of the Italianate bungalow and what some of those vertical elements did with a hip roof on top, and we looked at the application of that here on our larger portion of the building. So what was a gable coming out here has now removed to a hip, and I think you'll be able to see that a little bit better. You see how we're well below the max height. This is the alley, so this is the section in the other direction. The alley behind, the street in front, the adjacent structures along the alley as you go into the residential neighborhood. So you can start to get a sense of that scale and relationship, which is what I believe commissioners were asking for last time. And a lot of bike racks, which I'll explain a little bit more in a minute. The additional 3-dimensional views, that said alley in question with the adjacent building for scale purposes and the proposed building next to it. Happy to zoom around. There's also the full updated simulation. We also went a block over and took a picture from the out in front of the street into the bungalows. It's hard to see. You can see the adjacent project in between these two. We tried to do what we believe to be the worst case scenario, where you would see the most of our building. Even hid some of the landscape and stuff, just to really highlight where we believe the roof line would be based on a three-dimensional computer simulation. You can see that aligns pretty well with the elevations from the front side of the project as well. That being said, I'd love to touch a little bit on some site plan and floor plan updates, mainly derived from some great feedback we heard here. We did move this path a bit in order to provide an opportunity for a tree and some more landscaping along this property line. Made sure that there was enough room for landscaping and vegetation along this property line. And then also we have reconfigured the bottom floor, bumping this out a little bit to provide a one-story element against the residential neighborhood, more than doubling the bike parking, as staff mentioned. We moved not only long-term bike parking, a new secure storage room here. We moved the door access point to the courtyard. That was a comment, and it's a large door. It's a 4-foot door, so it's super wide, easy to get in and out, a little more security with it on this side. And then we even further added some public or guest bike parking along the street with some racks that you could secure yourself to. So all derived from what we thought were very good comments here. Now the only thing accessed this way is trash. These windows, you'll see in a minute, were realigned with some of the comments we had as well. But those were the major sort of site plan, floor plan changes. If you do look in your package, you'll see we've also really thought about mechanical locations and where equipment might be. And as we look through the elevations, you'll notice we highlight some of that. Wanted to talk a lot about details. This was like, Keith and I were just talking, this was like a great architectural lesson in building detailing. We did go around town. We tried to provide examples of where we got these addresses, even if you will. I'm ready to fall on a sword. I still have a metal awning in there. I found multiple locations where I thought it was appropriate. I have an alternative if I get kicked out of the room, but otherwise I wanted to say that I thought it was a great hierarchical entry statement beyond just having the larger opening, was to have that metal awning. Otherwise, we have some light examples. We looked at some awning examples. You'll notice all awnings have been removed from, this is Spanish grid, so we're north, the two north sides, we call it northeast, northwest, and are on the southeast and southwestern side of the building. We looked at some great examples of Juliet balconies. All balconies have been made authentic, where they're actually in front of a door, no windows this time. We showed some examples of how that detailing would work. We brought the doors down to the finished floor and put them in places where we thought had the least access to other public outdoor space. So can talk a little bit more about that in the elevations as well. We have notes on the plans that all walls are 8 inches thick, and then we also showed some example recessed windows, some stair railings, some riser and tread details, even some eave details and scalloped edges that we thought would be appropriate based on our conversation here last time. We found some gate examples of something that we thought was appropriate. This building actually has both. It has smaller gates and bigger gates. And then we took this and applied it to our updated building design and elevations. So I'll go over some of that in general. You are seeing here, back to the front elevation again, you're seeing the major changes between what was proposed, bottom of the page, and what we are currently, where we have landed and currently changed. I think most noticeable is the change of the hip roofs beyond, as well as the distance between the window header and eave. You notice that they are all consistent, all are the same throughout the building now. I thought that was a very good comment last time. We have removed awnings that were aesthetic and function only and made them authentic and purposeful. You can see the updated gate design based on the examples that we have provided. There's a little transition. We have tried sort of to provide the highest level of articulation on the street side. The one-story element of this project that faces the historic Italianate bungalow steps up. We did add a mechanical well for any of this, the lower portion of the building. So we do have a mechanical well back behind this roof that shows up in plans, probably better than elevation. And then we also made this portion of the roof mechanical as well. So we tried to solve some of those questions that were brought up before. In the distance, we did take the recommendation of tile surround at entry doors. So we've shown that not at project entries, because we still like the gate work, but we have shown it at individual unit entry doors in the courtyard itself. Again, sort of a three-dimensional view of what we had before and where we're at now. You can see there's some minor roof changes to the front elements. Really, the largest portion is the plate height consistency. We had a higher plate on the upper floor last time. Bringing that down to something more consistent really makes that third story start to regulate and step back from the two-story mass. So we provided that. I'm here with any questions. I know I tried to keep on time. I feel decent about that, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I think we have the full drawing set if we want to pull any of that up, or if you have any specific examples like where did these awnings end up. I didn't want to go page by page.
Through the chair, if it's okay, maybe just do a quick flip through of the plan set. It should be available.
Sure, I think that's here now.
Yeah.
So it literally was we swapped the graphic out here, so it was quite a bit of swaps. We added stats on the much greater number of parking spaces. This page, couple of pages didn't change much. I think I walked you through the site plan, floor plan changes. On some of these upper floors, you can see where we have added some mechanical space. This is that one-story bump out that we added to help the massing along the alley have a step along the way, if you will. The upper floors and then the top roof plan that shows where we think we can get a great mechanical well to help service that. The unit plans have not changed. The elevations are updated, really focused on overall heights and floor-to-floor heights all being consistent. Just a reminder, the courtyard is still elevated about 18 inches or so. 2 feet. 2 feet 10, I think even. There's a pretty good elevation to get us up out of the floodplain to make sure these residences don't struggle with that. Here's the two elevations that would receive a little bit more sun, where we use the application of some window awnings in a style and detailing that we found around, or lower roof elements as well. So you can see that in relationship. The updated sections as requested. Again, I highlighted some of the adjacent projects just because it came out a little lighter than I would have desired. updated not only just the color material board, the two-piece tile that was requested throughout the project, but also updated the project details that we briefly touched upon here as the design intent going forward. We did update the civil and drainage, just trying to make sure that we had some of those landscape plans or landscape opportunities we talked about, and some more landscape buffer as well, as I believe that was discussion items. Beyond there, here's the new updated three-dimensional simulations. Again, the elevations are so deceiving with that three-story mass and where it actually sits that you really only see a two-story mass in many of these until you see how they relate to each other. And this is where we really thought we liked that hip roof and why we went that direction, as it exposes itself and lends itself more on the southern side. We updated the three-dimensional isometric views from Superman above, and then the adjacent streets and alley per your request, as well as the overall street elevation. So thank you, staff, for having that all there and prepared, and we're here and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. That completes your presentation?
Yeah, slightly over.
No worries. Thank you. We'll open public comment.
Thank you. So I do have 3 speaker slips. First is going to be Tony Vassallo, followed by Terry Malinowski, and then Leon Olson. So Tony Vassallo, if you want to come up to the podium.
I'm going to go last.
Oh, you're going to go last. All right. Terry Malinowski.
There should be a button to turn that microphone on by, yeah.
Right in the middle.
Thank you very much. Hello, Terry Malinowski, representing the homeowners of the building just to the north. And first of all, to RRM, it looks great, and to the board for encouraging the revisions. Thank you for that. I just have a few questions. Just appreciate the new window placement configuration. I saw that the depth of the walls is 8 inches. If you could let us know what the depth of the recess in the window is, that would be good to know. We like the awnings, the Juliet balconies, the roof tile, yay.
Got mic on. It is on.
Yes?
Yeah.
How about that feedback? Okay, so we like the awnings, Juliet balconies, and the roof tiles. On the door surround tiles, is that on all of the doors, or is that just on a few doors on that interior, the access? The landscaping pockets, those are great. I had a question that would put it in the board's court to, landscaping is not my forte, but if those are the best trees that provide the most screening for my clients to the north, that would be great. We like the bike parking, thank you. And let me just make sure I've got my list. I think that's it. Thank you very much. Look forward to hearing back.
Thank you.
Okay, next to speak will be Leon Olson.
I'm Leon Olson. I live at 531 Chapala. We want to thank you for the encouragement you gave the applicant at the last session. We think the project is improved, and we also, while we might have hoped for a little bit more from the applicant, we're grateful for what the applicant has shown us today. We believe it's a better project. I really am only left with a couple of comments. One is that the landscaping between the two buildings, that area is about 6 feet, and the trees that are there have a canopy of about 40 30 to 40 feet. So I think they might not be the appropriate trees for that area. And the last thing I said, you've heard me say before, but our place to make this comment is limited. And so I'm going to say it again. There are 43 apartments here. There are 43 bedrooms here, 15 apartments. That could mean as many as 60 cars. It's a huge impact on our neighborhood as it is throughout the city as we begin to build these buildings without places for parking. And so, given that we don't have much place to make these comments, I say it again, this is a problem for Santa Barbara and these communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and our last speaker is Tony Vassallo.
Mr. Chair and members of the commission, again, I'd like to thank you for the changes, the design changes you made to the project. And I really want to focus and ask for your support for restricted parking in the Brinkerhoff Landmark District. The development pressures I've learned since the last meeting are much, much larger than I expected. You've got another project coming in besides this one on the 400 block of Chapala, and then there's the UCSB, thousands of people coming in the downtown area. If we don't have restricted parking on Brinkerhoff, it's going to be chaos, and I don't think the district can function well. So what I'm asking is your support to put it in the public record so that we can use your support to line up with our neighbors in Brinkerhoff. I haven't spoken with anyone who is not in favor of restricted parking on the Brinkerhoff district. It'll keep the district functioning well. We have lots of new changeovers in properties on Brinkerhoff. People are repairing and restoring, and the lifeblood of the district is the street parking. Without restrictions, it just won't work. They would like to see the change as soon as possible. We're really hoping that you support that effort. After all, the Brinkerhoff district is your responsibility. You've been restricting it for years, decades, actually. And we don't want these new style projects without parking to wind up being vehicle storage on Brinkerhoff Avenue and in our district. I apologize if I'm repeating, but your own city report, 5% of the people that live in the downtown area don't drive cars. One of the historical aspects of Brinkerhoff is keeping congestion out of it. I won't say anything about the project per se. There's so many of them coming down the pipeline. But I do want to say one thing. These new projects are designed to bring new housing to Santa Barbara, but Brinkerhoff has a history of workforce housing right from its inception. We are the neighborhood that created the housing for the workforce in Santa Barbara. And this is a quote from your own report that you'll see in the next item. Brinkerhoff Avenue is noted for its attempt to house the growing permanent population of service industry workers. That goes all the way back to the early 1900s. We are the neighborhood that has combined worker housing and business services together, synergistically. We've done it for decades, and the success continues to this day. We love our Brinkerhoff Historic District. We're happy that you review everything that goes on within the district. Speaking for our own property, we've made it good for another 100 years. With your HLC help, those historic buildings, the diversity of those buildings can remain, and the sense of place. It's not just the buildings, it's the sense of place, it's the context of the district within the fabric of the downtown area that is so important. It is a refuge to the higher energy congestion of the State Street and Chapala areas around it. And as I mentioned, the new owners are investing. The charm and grace of the district really begs for your protection, and I'm hoping that today we can get support from you for the restricted parking that we need. In closing, I just want to say, I hope you've read the letter that my wife and I have submitted to the commission. Your support for the restricted parking is paramount. Otherwise, there will be no district left. Would you help us with that support?
Well,
thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lindvik.
I have a question of the Brinkerhoff resident. You are a Brinkerhoff resident, right?
My wife and I lived there 13
Yeah,
13 years.
the answer is yes. There is no restrictive parking now?
There's 90-minute parking.
You have to go back to the
for
mic.
anyone.
You have to go back to the microphone so the record can pick you up.
Restrictive,
There is 90-minute
I understand
parking
that.
for anyone.
there's no restrictive parking beyond that.
And people can apply, residents can apply for a parking permit that allows them to park there in addition to the 90 minutes.
Because there is restrictive parking elsewhere in the city. I mean, Arlington Avenue has restrictive parking. It's unfortunate that you have to come here and give an impassioned speech like you did and make us feel bad because we can't do anything about it.
You can support us. That's all we're asking.
So have you gone to city council yourself?
City Council, the mayor's aware of what we need. Public Works is aware of what we need. We will go everywhere.
I certainly do appreciate that. That's not on the agenda, so we can't be talking about it.
I apologize.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair and just to Commissioner Lembeck, I just want to say for the record too that we do have public comment, for this project as part of the public record, and that letter can be sent to Public Works. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I have no more speaker slips. There are no participants online. I just want to acknowledge that we did have written correspondence from Tony Vasallo and from Tim Gloriana and Todd Boynick. And that, back to you.
Thank you. We'll close public comment and bring it to the commission for questions. If don't seem to be any questions, so we'll roll right into comments. There must be plenty of those. Commissioner McClure.
I have a comment on your property line trees. So you're probably looking for columnar trees, like an 10 foot diameter by very vertical, and some of those species might be Podocarpus hinkeli, Stenocarpus, and Tristania, and maybe Italian cypress, but not in a line. We're trying to get these narrow columnar trees would be what you're looking for. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Well,
Commissioner
Chair?
Beck.
Commissioner, thank you. I sense that, I have a question. Go to your exterior elevations, the common elevation, north and south. I want to understand what the, go back to, yeah. I want to understand what the window size is and the window head height, particularly on the third floor.
Certainly, those window head heights are at 8 foot above the finished floor.
So it's a 9-foot ceiling.
9-foot plate, correct. As I said, to be honest, most of our projects are requiring some sort of what I will call an insulation heel. Happy to get into more details, but Title 24 currently requires that you're able to get insulation all the way out to the edge of the wall so that you're creating a thermal envelope, not just shoving stuff into the little.
I understand that. Yeah.
So there's about another foot above that plate.
And it's just me as an individual, others may not have the same concern, but I think the proportion of the windows, particularly on the third story, are too large. The head height is too close to the edge of the tile. There's an uncomfortable feeling about the proportions there, and I would suggest that, number one, I think the awnings are misplaced. It appears that the flaunce or the valance or whatever of the awning is at the head height. And I think that really the awning as it attaches to the wall should be closer to the head height. And the awning flaunce or valance is dropping down. It can drop down as far as, your eye level or lower, but you won't have to go that far. But it should be dropping down and would help bring the feeling of that elevation, the proportions in better relationship. But I feel that those window head heights on the third floor in particular are too high. The proportion of the windows are not right on that wall.
On the third floor.
Third floor, I mean, it's a function of how much plaster there is between the top of the head and the tile eave line, which isn't really an eave, but it's just a tile line. Whereas you get down on the first and second floor, you've got a lot of plaster between the head height of the second floor window and the sill of the third floor. The proportions are better. You get up on that third level, and there's not enough plaster wall up there. And it really, it's, if you're designing an elegant mansion and whatever, I mean, I don't know that you need to have 8-foot high window heads on here. It just.
You could lose 2 lights and be done with it.
Yeah, whatever. Thank you.
Chair, and to Commissioner Lenvik, how much do you think it should come down? Do you think
Well,
to
I
just
think-
drop the whole window down, or do you think it should
No.
be a smaller window?
I think it should be a smaller window. I mean,
Okay.
his sill height on those windows is probably, I don't know, 24 inches, 28 inches, maybe something like that. I have no idea. But the window's too big on that wall. The proportions are wrong on the third floor. It'd be the same on all the third floor elevations, but and also the awnings have got to be dropped down and so that they really function as an awning to shade those windows. They're not doing it now. There are a lot of bad examples of awnings in Santa Barbara, but there are also a lot of good examples of awnings on windows in Santa Barbara. And I think we've got to make this elevation better. You can say, well, no one's going to see it. I understand that, but no one's going to see it.
We see it.
But we see it here, and it gets even worse when you stand back because you don't see the roof when you're back. And you'll never see the roof in true in true elevation as you walk down the street. So you're going to see the windows and the top of the plaster wall, and maybe a little tile edge there, but, you know, the roof goes away because you can't, you know, it's whatever up there. But I think I would need to be assured that we're going to get some better proportions on those windows on the third floor before I would vote for yes on this. Otherwise, it's a good job. You've answered our questions. You've given us a good response to our concerns, and I think it's going to be a good job. But I share the concerns that the neighbors have with regard to parking. We have seen so many projects come through recently that have no parking. They not only have no parking, some of them have no place to put an emergency vehicle, no place to, because the street is occupied. You cannot park on the street. You have no place for an emergency vehicle. You have no place for the plumber to come. You have no place for the people to unload their furniture. You have, you know, it is horrible, absolutely horrible. And a lot of us talk to the council members and the mayor like you do. What's going to happen? It's not going to happen because 3 or 4 architectural historian board members talk to the council. It's going to happen because a lot of neighbors get upset, and a lot of neighbors go in and complain. And the council is going to say, oh, our hands are tied. It's a state law. So all you can do is hope. All you can do is hope that the people that are loaning money on these projects are going to say, gosh, we're not going to loan money on a project that's got no parking, because they'll end up being vacant. I mean, that's what you can hope for, is that the bankers take control. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. It doesn't happen often, probably, but
Public transportation also.
I've talked to transportation.
We want to
Commissioner
refrain from
Uli.
having a
Yeah, if we could-
free-for-all.
If we could just bring it back for
Commissioner Dordan.
discussion.
I'm generally supportive of the project as this has unfolded. I went back and looked at my notes after the first meeting of things that I needed to see. I'm seeing them. I want to commend you for shaping your presentation to address the things that came out of the last one. I think it makes for an efficient conversation. I think the more I look at this, the more I realize this is in some ways an important project because it brings out the growing pains of what's happening in this town. And that is with the greater density, the greater traffic and so forth. And I know it may or may not be beyond our purview, but I want to echo the comments that I'm very supportive of the community's concerns about the impact of the way Santa Barbara is growing. And I think it is incumbent upon the city, the mayor and the city council, and to address those concerns, because it will only continue to create bad feelings within the community. That's not your problem. I'm just making a general comment about that. So I want to thank you for addressing our concerns, and I can generally supportive of the project.
Yes, I agree.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner.
I appreciate the project. I support it with the various tweaks of Commissioner Lenvix. And I think that the previous applicant, just before your project, could have benefited from your palette, from the lighting and the colors, the tile, the splashes of color. It's exactly what was needed, and I'm really appreciative of your efforts in that part. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ansberg.
Thank you. I just have a couple. I'm agreeing with the commissioners. I want to say, great job overall, and I especially appreciate, this is a great example of working together and making the neighbors happy, and everybody needs to be considered, and so I really appreciate the neighbors expressing themselves, and I appreciate your response to them, and I appreciate this commission for helping to facilitate that. That's largely a lot of what we do. So thank you. And I think that you've done some great adjustments to address, both sides. We talked about that, and I think you've done a really good job on that. My only small things are, I think that in that image where you show the streetscape, the building looks really white compared to the others. I don't think that's how it really is. So, but I would like it to be, you know, kind of blend in a little bit more. I do love, you know, the bright white, but I think, you know, try to sort of blend it in so that it doesn't just pop out too much. And then also, and I said this before too, I still feel like the hard edge corners, you know, I'd like to see it more of a softer finish. Not the building to the north is very lumpy, but which is beautiful. But you know, just something a little bit more handmade looking. And then also the other thing is the tile. I appreciate that you put the tile. I would love to see tile around the front entry. If you wanted to do that, I think that would really be beautiful, and I think it would give your building a lot of punch and would help it to sort of nod to the building to the north a little bit. Not that you're doing that, but you know, we're all about tile here. And then also the entry gate. You've got this bar going across at the top. Is there any way that that could go away and it just could have the spikes going up and not have this very, I just think that would be more beautiful. And then the awning color, I just consider, I like what you have, but I think maybe a Santa Barbara blue could be really pretty. You know, why not? And then as far as the Commissioner Lenvick's comments on the windows, I'm wondering, would it be okay to just, because these windows match the size of the other windows below, could they just be simply lowered down, and would that be acceptable?
Go to the street elevation, please. Those windows on the second floor of the street elevation are probably an appropriate size for the windows that would be on the third floor. They're, you know,
Oh, okay.
you know, it's just, they kind of fit within the plaster.
They're more squarish. But,
Yeah.
but when you go to that other elevation, on this elevation, which is the west, and then on the south, so that's the alley, the south, the south elevation, right?
Again, just for clarity, we're on the
Oh,
Spanish
okay,
grid.
because we always have the angle, yeah.
Yeah,
mhm.
I'm calling the alley the west.
Okay.
And then the adjacent to Italianate bungalow, the south.
Okay,
I
okay.
apologize
Well,
if
that's important
confusing.
yeah. So,
So it's planned.
By a couple fractions of degrees, it's correct.
Planned north.
Planned
so
north.
anyway, I wonder, given it's these elevations, whether it would, and since they match the ones, I'm looking particularly at the ones on the far left, that they match exactly the windows on the first floor and the second floor and the third floor. It seems to me that if you make them smaller, it might look more unusual or odd.
Right.
But anyway,
That's Santa Barbara.
okay, well, I guess I would vote for just lowering them, but yeah, I'm not gonna, I'm not insisting, I'm just saying, I agree that there isn't enough space at the top, but I don't know that you need to change the window size. But Commissioner Lenvick has a different opinion. So those are, that's all I have to say. But thank you, and really think that it's looking really good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm really pleased with what you've done. You've done a good job. My comments are not meant to have any negative impact on what you've done. I would hope that maybe at where the tile meets the plaster, that there could be a plaster mold, so that the tile kind of overhangs just a little bit and help increase that shadow line. But otherwise, it's a good project. Yeah.
We're beyond questions, but you can
Oh,
ask it
darn
anyway.
it, darn it, I missed my chance. On the east, so you've got awnings on the west, which is really necessary. What about awnings on the east?
Again,
That's the front.
I'm going to call that the front.
That's
And
okay.
last time I was here, I was told that was an inappropriate place for awnings. So you will get some morning sunlight,
You'll get some-
especially in the summer.
Summertime, you certainly
Summer
will.
morning sunlight.
Yeah.
From a programmatic standpoint, just to walk back through plan, this is bike storage.
Yep.
This is actually circulation you come upstairs to some circulation that leads you into bedrooms. These would be bedrooms, and then this would be your living space. So it's these two where, and I'm all due respect, where I had an awning last time and was told it was probably inappropriate.
And not by me.
Well, we'll pull up the tape and verify.
At some point, you just got to ignore us and go. Just ignore us and go, you know.
Chair? Oh, sorry. I forgot to also say about the parking. I really appreciate the parking issue, and I agree completely with what Commissioner Jordan said. We don't have we can't say anything about it, but I do agree, and I would hope that whoever does have any power over this would be addressing it, because it's extremely serious.
Thank you. Any other comments? We share your frustration. There are a lot of things that are foisted on us by smarter people in Sacramento that we all have to deal with. So ultimately, talk to your elected representative in Sacramento and say, what the hell are you doing? Because it's what they're doing to us, and unfortunately, we can't do anything about it. Let's see, this is here for project design approval, and I'm wondering if everybody's got a sense that it meets that. Have we seen sufficient detail that gives you a sense that we can do PDA?
Well, I'll make a motion.
I think the architect understands what my concerns are, and he can choose to respond to them or ignore them. I mean, that's life, you know.
Well, I'll give him a list of comments that he must respond to, and then the rest of it he can consider for himself.
Okay.
Vice Chair Uli, the only thing I was going to say is, they are requesting an action today, and we do need an action today. You can either just do comments as part of your approval, or you can actually place conditions on the project. Like, for example, if you want the windows to be lowered or shortened in size to match, you can make that a formal condition. So it's up to the commission.
All right, thank you. Let me just pick out some comments here that I would share and just kind of get a sense if a majority of the commission agrees. First one would be consider dropping the opening height at the third floor or change the window proportions at the third floor more reflective of what's shown on the front elevation. How many people support that general comment?
Raise your hand.
No. Yeah, no coercion involved, of course. All right. Let's see. How many would generally support application of tile around the entry as Commissioner Ensberg suggested? All right. There's also consideration to use Santa Barbara Malaga Green. I think that's the name of the paint. Malaga Green, I think, is the name of the paint. The Santa Barbara blue color, paint color. You made a suggestion about using the Santa Barbara blue paint color. I think that's Malaga Green.
I suggested using the Santa Barbara blue for the awning instead of the deep red.
Which is called Malaga Green.
Okay, but you said
Malaga Green they put on fence posts, on lamp posts.
Yeah.
like the outside of this building right here.
Yeah, I don't know if that's Santa Barbara blue, but I'll reference it as that, and I don't know how staff is going to figure out which blue it is, but.
Just so there's Santa Barbara blue. Malaga green is typical for our various equipment throughout the city, as you know,
Street
and it's
furniture.
more of a street furniture. It's a deep green color. So I'm not sure if that's what you're referencing or an actual blue color from our awnings guide, which we can reference that. Yeah.
With a street name, Santa Barbara blue. I don't know what that means, but anyway, I know what you're saying. All right, okay.
You're too young.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right. Those were the big ones, I think. There are more comments here that I'll make, but, which I'll do now, I guess.
My concern is that they address the awning height in relationship
I've
to the
got
window.
that on my list. Yep. All right. I'm sure somebody will make a motion for project design approval.
Yes, I will.
All right.
Make a motion for project design
I'll
approval.
I'll second.
Ginsburg. All right. With these
those
comments.
Yes.
Comment number 1 is the commission thanks the applicant team for their time, presentation, and work to get to this hearing. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. And responding to our comments so well. 2, consider trees between the two properties, I think this is the north property line, that have a smaller canopy. Next, consider dropping opening height or change window proportions at the 3rd floor using the front elevation as a possible reference. Next, drop the awning mounting point to the head height of the opening. I think that's consistent with what you're asking. Yeah. Next, blend the color of the building to fit into the surrounding buildings. How you do that, you're just going to tell us. Next, consider application of tile at the entry. Next, consider Santa Barbara blue, quote-unquote, color for awnings. I believe that was the reference. Next, at roof, rake, and eaves, provide a plaster molding detail. Those were the ones I wrote down. Anybody did I miss anything? You want to change something?
Thank you. The texture on the plaster.
Plaster texture.
And maybe an eased edge on the corner. So it's not a steel, little softer, more handmade look.
So consider providing a little softer detail and an eased edge at all corners.
Yeah.
Get everything?
Yes.
Did I miss anything, staff?
No, but we'll just have to go through the project compatibility findings.
Yes, isn't that a pleasure?
Okay, so with those comments, right?
Yes.
Is it consistent with design guidelines? Yes. Is it compatible with the architectural character of the city and neighborhood? Yes, it is. Appropriate size, mass, bulk, height, and scale. Is the mass, bulk, height, and scale of the project appropriate to its location and neighborhood? Yes. It is sensitive to adjacent landmarks and historic resources. Public views of the ocean and mountains. Does the design of the project respond appropriately to establish scenic public vistas? I don't think is relevant. Use of open space and landscaping. Does the project include an appropriate amount of open space and landscaping? Yes, it does.
That's all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Okay, Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan,
Yes.
Commissioner Drury,
Yes.
Commissioner Ensberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Lundvik,
Yes.
Vice Chair Uli.
Yes.
Thank you, motion passes.
Thank you. There is a 10-day appeal period past this approval, and we want to thank the public for coming and sharing your thoughts with us. We appreciate that.
Commissioners, if I may, I just really want to say thank you for the candidness and for what is clear a desire to make projects better. And
Thank you.
that I really appreciate. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Share with your neighbors.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.
We all want better projects.